Chapter 886. North District 54545 Outer Sect Ruins. At this moment, the magma lake had been artificially cooled. White Yiksha methodically issued one order after another, allowing the Alliance's community to begin the restoration of 54,545 Outer Sect. Because the time between Absolute Evil's appearance and its destruction was too short, there were no high-ranking powerhouses near 54545 Outer Sect. Even Vera had been abducted by Wuming, leaving White Yiksha alone. Therefore, the restoration of the North District's 5-digit Outer Sect 54545 Outer Sect fell to her. Seriously, I'm not the ruler of the North District. Why should I be the commander? White Yiksha kept complaining. In fact, the main reason was that no one came to help, which caused White Yiksha's dissatisfaction. After the rulers of the North District received the news that Absolute Evil had been destroyed, they did not even think of going to 54545 Outer Sect. When there was a powerful external enemy like Absolute Evil, perhaps they would unite, but once Absolute Evil was eliminated, they would fall back into a state of internal strife. Anyway, it was not their outer sect, so there was no need to care. Moreover, White Yiksha could not care about them if they did not come. After all, Absolute Evil had been destroyed, so it did not matter if they came or not. But she was definitely dissatisfied. Villo, that brat, really abducted Vera. Although Vera did not play much of a role in command, she was at least someone from the North District. Now that the North District's outer sect was being rebuilt, how could a ruler of the East District be in command? However, at this moment, White Yiksha happened to sense Wuming's presence. Why is that brat Villo here? Although White Yiksha complained and hoped that someone could replace her to command the reconstruction of 54,545 Outer Sect, she really did not expect Wuming to come back. Are you looking for me to talk about the Dragon of Origin? Or is there something else? White Yiksha guessed in her heart. Yo, White Yiksha. Wuming greeted White Yiksha as he walked into the small command post that was temporarily set up. Where's Vera? Or have you abducted Vera? White Yiksha asked in annoyance. I sent Vera back to her community. Anyway, Vera can't do anything here, can she? As if it was his own home, Wuming sat down without hesitation. But because there were no chairs, Wuming could only find something to sit on. Then why did thou come back? What's the matter? White Yiksha didn't mind Wuming's behavior. He was used to it. I'm here to hand Galgi and the others over to you. As Wuming spoke, he extended his hand and a translucent ball of light appeared in his hand. Galgi, Belle, Aurora, and Gria could be vaguely seen in the ball of light. This is just a simple sealing boundary formed by Lune runes. You should be able to open it easily. As for why he treated Galgi like this, the three of them and a griffin were indeed not small. It was really not good to hand them over to White Yiksha. This way, they were sealed in a ball of light and handed to White Yiksha. It was also convenient for White Yiksha to carry them around. That was thoughtful. White Yiksha took the ball of light that sealed Galgi and the others. He took out the gift card, and the ball of light disappeared with a wave of his hand. After I'm done with this, I'll lock them up in the East Prison. It was reasonable to say that Wuming's mission was completed, but Wuming showed no signs of leaving. Is there anything else? I have to leave Hakata for a while. As if he was waiting for White Yiksha to say this, Wuming immediately answered after White Yiksha asked. It's not like thou has never left before, White Yiksha complained. Or are thou preparing not to come back for a long time this time? White Yiksha hit the nail on the head. After all, my purpose in coming to Hakata was to find my body. Since my body has been found, I should go and deal with my enemy. This enemy, Wuming referred to Gidia. Even without the Black Origin mud, Gidia was already considered a tyrant in the Type Moon world. With the Black Origin mud, it could be said that Gidia had become even more terrifying. Wuming was not afraid of an enemy like Az Dakaha, who only used the Black Origin mud as a weapon, but it was impossible for someone like Gidia to only use the Black Origin mud as a weapon. Simply put, it was the difference between a magician and a magician. Magicians only used magic as a weapon, but magicians would delve deeper into it. If Gaia were to delve deeper into the black origin mud and discover something that would allow her to completely master it, it would be very troublesome. Wuming had to take the initiative to attack Gydia before Gydia made a move. In that case, the reason thou came to find me is very clear. Without a doubt, Wuming wanted to ask White Yiksha about the Dragon of Origin before leaving. White Yiksha's expression became serious. With a light wave of her hand, the place where the two were changed, White Yiksha brought Wuming to a special space. In the distance was a large white snow mountain. Wuming and White Yiksha stood on a plain that resembled ice. A trace of light shuttled through the mountain range in the distance. In the distant horizon, one of the venues of White Yiksha's gift game. I don't know much about the Dragon of Origin. I can only provide you with some information. Putting away her usual playful expression, White Yiksha straightened her attitude and looked at Wuming. That's right. White Yiksha brought Wuming here to tell Wuming about the Dragon of Origin. That was a long time ago. It was so long ago that it was longer than my lifespan. As for why White Yiksha said that, it was because when I first gained sentience, I accidentally saw the Origin Dragon. As if recalling the past, White Yiksha's aura became slightly in line with her age. That was at the end of the day. I didn't know how I discovered the other party. At the same time, the thought of this is the Dragon of Origin automatically appeared in my mind. Although the other party noticed me, it only glanced at me lightly. There was no emotion in its eyes. After that, it immediately left as though it was just passing by. Turning her head to look at Wuming, White Yiksha continued speaking. I didn't feel that feeling from thee, but judging from the appearance, thy body is exactly the same as the Dragon of Origin's body that I saw. It's just that the size is different, and there's another very important point. White Yiksha flew into the air and looked at Wuming. The Dragon of Origin I saw was much stronger than thee. Even at that time, I felt that I wasn't its match. One had to know that the original White Yiksha was not White Yiksha, but the White Knight Monarch. It was a powerful existence whose spirit lattice had not been shrunk. The Dragon of Origin that White Yiksha mentioned made the White Knight Monarch feel that he was not its match. Without a doubt, the other party must be an existence that exceeds a single digit. White Yiksha judged. By the way, White Yiksha, are there no single-digit existences in Hakata? Chapter 887. Wuming had been in Hakata for a while and had seen existences with 3 to 7 digits. Although White Yiksha had fallen from 2 digits to 4 digits because he had converted to Buddhism, Wuming had a rough understanding of the strength of 2 digits after fighting with Az Dakaha. After all, Az Dakaha, who had the black soil root, could no longer be in 3 digits. He had almost displayed the strength of 2 digits, but Az Dakaha's essence was still in 3 digits. However, Wuming had never heard of or seen the existence of a single digit. In the ancient books in No Name's underground library, Wuming had not found any content related to a single digit. Therefore, Wuming could not help but be curious about a single digit. Actually, from 3 digits onward, you can't divide them according to strength. You have to look at your own spirit lattice. Logically speaking, below 3 digits, you had to look at your spirit lattice to divide them. However, spirit lattice below 3 digits did not have an overwhelming effect on strength. Therefore, from 3 digits onward, you had to divide them according to strength. If your spirit lattice reached 2 digits, your strength would naturally be in 2 digits. Of course, there were those without spirit lattice. At that time, you could only look at your own strength. For example, 16 Knight's essence was human. In addition, there were no traces of spirit lattice on 16 Knight's body. Logically speaking, 16 Knights should be in the 7 digits. However, 16 Knights had an inhumanly strong physique. This allowed 16 Knight's strength to be in the 4 digits. Therefore, 16 Knight's strength was in the 4 digits. However, for an ordinary human to have the strength of 4 digits, 16 Knight's body probably had some hidden power that he had not figured out. In any case, that was what Wuming believed. After that, let's take a look at Az Dakaha. If a million gods surrounded Az Dakaha, and Az Dakaha activated Avesta to copy the strength of the million gods into himself, Az-Dakaha's strength would instantly reach 2 digits. However, under normal circumstances, Az-Dakaha's spirit lattice would still be in the 3 digits. Therefore, Az-Dakaha's strength in Hakata was a 3-digit demon king who would not cower in the face of a 2-digit enemy. In short, not having a spirit lattice did not mean that one was weak. However, the stronger the spirit lattice, the stronger one was. As for the single digit you mentioned, there is none. With this foreshadowing, White Yiksha's answer to Wu Ming was much easier. None. Wu Ming was stunned. I can't say that there aren't any. 1-digit numbers do exist, but they're no longer creatures with self-awareness. They're things like laws. Since 1-digit numbers were something similar to laws, in that case, Hakata's strongest combat power is only in the 2 digits, right? Wu Ming deduced. You are not stupid. However, Hakata's 2-digit numbers are very rare. There are only 17 in total. As for the 2-digit level, do you know Shakyamuni? That bald donkey belongs to the 2-digit category. This made Wu Ming come to a realization. It turned out that there were only 17 2-digit numbers in Boxting. It was indeed as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. However, if the founder of the world's 3 major religions like Shakyamuni had a 2-digit number, then the main gods of other myths and religions' founders would probably have a 3-digit number. After all, there were only 17 2-digit numbers. However, Hakata had 100 god groups. There were very few god groups that could have a 2-digit number. However, 3-digit god groups were almighty. Therefore, most of the main gods of the god groups should have a 3-digit number. Only a very small number of the main gods of the god groups should have a 4-digit number. Ordinary gods would have a 5-digit number. Therefore, Hakata had said that Absolute Evil's clone body had the strength of a god. After all, most of Absolute Evil's clone bodies had a 5-digit number. A 6-digit number was in existence with some ability. A 7-digit number was probably an ordinary person. That's why I've never heard of the existence of a single-digit number after being in Hakata for so long. This suspicious point had been resolved. No, if it were now, there would still be a single-digit number, White Yiksha said as he stared at Wu Ming. Are you referring to me? Wu Ming pointed at himself. I'm referring to you. White Yiksha smiled knowingly at Wu Ming. Didn't you reveal your true body when you destroyed Az-Dakaha? Although I don't know how you hid your spirit lattice, your body leaked a trace of the aura of a spirit lattice. Based on that aura, I can determine that even if I return the Godhead and retrieve the spirit lattice, I won't be your match. Furthermore, it will be an overwhelming victory. Without a doubt, you aren't on the same level as us. You are undoubtedly a single-digit number. The so-called spirit lattice referred to heritage and merit. Hyunryong's heritage was Hyunryong's, and the Villo's merit was the Villo's. Sadrake was considered a figurehead. As the root dragon, Wu Ming didn't have any heritage or merit. Logically speaking, he didn't have a spirit lattice. Therefore, it wasn't that Wu Ming had hidden his spirit lattice, but that he really didn't have one. However, White Yiksha said that she had sensed it. As the root dragon, Wu Ming wasn't bound by the box court. Wu Ming guessed that his own status had replaced the spirit lattice, causing White Yiksha to make the wrong judgment. However, if one really only looked at Wu Ming's status, Wu Ming was indeed higher than any existence in the box court. At this moment, Wu Ming was an existence that was only one step away from entering the adult stage. Although he had not taken this crucial step, Wu Ming would definitely not be in the double digits now. After all, his apostasis had been liberated to the maximum. In that case, he would definitely be in the single digits. However, you are much weaker than the root dragon I first encountered. Even so, I can determine that you aren't a 2-digit number, but an existence higher than that. As a former 2-digit number, White Yiksha's judgment was definitely correct. Although it was unbelievable, it was completely confirmed that Wu Ming was a 1-digit number. After that, did you not see the root dragon again? Wu Ming asked again. The next time I saw you was you. Speaking of which, when I saw your true body previously, I couldn't recall it because it was too long ago. However, I kept feeling that it was déjà vu. Fortunately, I'm not that old. I still remember. White Yiksha opened her fan and waved it twice proudly. Then let's end it here. Since White Yiksha had nothing else to say, it was time to end it. No name, I will use my methods to take care of them in secret, but I still have to ask you to take care of them. Wu Ming's secret care was not as effective as White Yiksha's, the local snake's, care on the surface. You don't have to worry about this. Just based on the fact that you defeated absolute evil and No Name's performance during this period of time, No Name can be raised by a single digit to 6 digits. Furthermore, I'm prepared to give No Name the authority of a region ruler. The community's hierarchy was related to the entire community. It wasn't something that could be promoted just because one person made a significant contribution. However, 16 Knights and the others had indeed contributed a lot to No Name during this period of time after coming to the box court. Just the matter of defeating absolute evil's avatar was enough. Their strength had also been recognized by the lower 6 or 7 digits. With Wu Ming's defeat of absolute evil as an opportunity, No Name would have no problem rising to 6 digits. As for the region ruler, there was no need to mention it. No Name was originally a region ruler, and now it had the strength. White Yiksha was just returning it to its rightful owner. Then I'll leave it to you. Chapter 888. After bidding farewell to White Yiksha, Wu Ming returned to No Name in the East District. After all, even if he wanted to leave, he had to at least let his companions know. What was rare was that Wu Ming did not directly use the teleportation gate to enter No Name. Instead, he used the teleportation gate to arrive at a place that was still some distance away from No Name. Wu Ming was prepared to walk into No Name on foot, treating it as an experience. After all, I don't know when I'll be back again. Wu Ming finished speaking and walked towards No Name. The first thing that entered Wu Ming's eyes were naturally the 2 stone giants guarding the door. Then, Pest appeared in front of Wu Ming's eyes. Pest stood at the door, as if he had guessed that Wu Ming would go through the main entrance and quietly waited for him. Master, Senior Letitia asked me to wait for you here. Pest called out with some reluctance and even bowed. However, due to Wu Ming's abuse of power, Pest did not dare to be rude. He had always listened to Wu Ming and the others in No Name. As expected, he guessed it in the end. Wu Ming revealed a half-helpless and half-happy smile. He was helpless that his actions had been guessed. It was really contradictory that his companions could guess his actions. Let's go, Pest. Wu Ming did not say anything else. Since that was the case, the others in No Name probably knew that Wu Ming was preparing to leave. After all, Wu Ming had come to the box court to find his body. Since he had already found it, there was no need for Wu Ming to continue staying. Master, are you leaving? Although Wu Ming knew that Pest definitely knew about this, Pest's bluntness still surprised Wu Ming. That's right. Speaking of which, who guessed that I was leaving first? Wu Ming also asked without mincing his words. 16 Knights in reverse. Pest had no intention of hiding anything and went straight to the point. It had to be said that the 2 of them were indeed a master-servant duo. They were really straightforward. Upon hearing Pest's reply, Wu Ming thought to himself, as expected, in the current No Name, other than Wu Ming, only 16 Knights had such a brain. However, Wu Ming knew that he was going to leave soon, so he didn't care about this. Forget it. I'll do as you wish today. After that, Pest didn't say anything. He just obediently led the way for Wu Ming. Speaking of which, did they hold a banquet? It doesn't look like he's in the house, and he even asked you to lead the way. It was obvious that Pest wasn't leading Wu Ming in the direction of the house. Instead, the 2 of them were circling around No Name's house. It looked like they were heading towards the back of the house. Yes, Senior Letitia and the others have prepared a banquet for Master. Firstly, it's to celebrate Master defeating absolute evil. Secondly, it's to bid Master farewell. Wu Ming nodded silently. If that was the case, the entire No Name would be present. It was no wonder that it wasn't in the house. After all, even if No Name didn't have many members, there were still more than 100 of them. Most importantly, most of them were children. Compared to holding a banquet in the house, it was more comfortable to hold it in the open air. It could be said that they were considerate of the children. Wuming turned his gaze and saw Pest's frail, childlike figure. Although Pest was the demon king, he was only pushed to the front by the 80 million wraiths who died from the Black Death as their representative and sat on the demon king's throne. To be honest, Pest was just a child. Pest, have you mastered 4-digit strength recently? Wuming's tone was like an elder caring for a junior. Hearing Wuming's words, Pest froze for a moment and his footsteps slowed. But shortly after, Pest regained his composure and continued walking forward. Are you wondering why I care about you? Wuming, who saw through Pest's thoughts, asked again. Yes. Pest, who was walking in front of Wuming, nodded and replied softly. Thinking about it, it's not strange at all. You're my servant, so of course I care about you. Little did he know that Wuming's words could easily cause misunderstandings. Although Pest wouldn't misunderstand, these words were still jarring to Pest's ears. Pest stopped in his tracks and spoke with a heavy tone. But I'm only a slave of the master of no name. Pest didn't care about Wuming's identity and began to throw caution to the wind. After all, she was the demon king who was defeated by Wuming. She was a defeated demon king who belonged to no name. To be honest, although there was a saying that a defeated demon king would be included in the community of the person who defeated them, this rule wasn't mandatory. If the community didn't need it, they could reject it. From Pest's point of view, the reason she was included in No Name was because No Name currently lacked combat power. If that wasn't the case, what awaited Pest would be death. Now that the community lacked manpower, Pest was included, so she was no different from a slave of No Name. Previously, when Wuming was talking about his experiences in the Northern District in the chat room, although Pest was present, she didn't speak. She only listened quietly, as if she didn't have the right to speak. In the end, it was because of this reason. However, this was Pest's personal opinion. In fact, no one in No Name thought of Pest as a slave. Not even the slightest bit. Since she was part of the community, everyone was a family. Back then, Letitia joined No Name because she was defeated by the main force of the previous generation of No Name. Now, Letitia was completely integrated into No Name. She didn't look like a slave at all. Instead, Black Rabbit treated her intimately and even called Letitia Sr. First of all, we don't mean to treat you as a slave. That's just what you think. Wuming used his status as Pest's master to walk to Pest's side and rub Pest's little head with his large hand, as if telling Pest not to think too much. No one in No Name has ever ordered you around, right? And I didn't give you any unreasonable orders. Moreover, Wuming didn't give Pest many orders. Ever since he summoned Pest, Wuming had been running around outside and didn't see Pest much. You have to work hard to communicate with the others in the community, Pest. However, Pest didn't seem to care. I don't think I can communicate with the people of the community who killed my companions and enslaved me. That was true, but Pest was still a child. In this regard, Wuming could only sigh silently. Then, Wuming quietly reached his hand into the golden ripples that had opened up at some point and searched for something. Then, Wuming placed the item in front of Pest. Here. Chapter 889. What appeared in front of Pester was a bunch of cotton candy. Pester was stunned when she saw the cotton candy. This reminded her of the first time she met Wuming. At that time, Wuming had also bought cotton candy for her. She had to admit that the cotton candy was quite sweet. Let's not talk about how you are with the others for now. We have to get closer to each other. This cotton candy was bought by Wuming the last time. It was kept fresh by magic, so it had been left in Wuming's space. However, Pester didn't take it and turned her head to the side. Also, about your companions, if you use the method I used to summon you, they will definitely respond. However, when Wuming finished speaking, Pester was clearly stunned. You need a holy relic, right? I don't have their holy relic, Pester said in a fit of pique. Lating's case wasn't too bad. The flute she used was left behind, but it had been confiscated by White Yiksha. It was difficult to find it back. As for Wei Shi, he really didn't leave anything behind after disappearing. You should have seen how powerful your master is, right? Even without the holy relic, I can still find them. This is the agreement between you and your master. Trust me. To put it simply, Wu-ming was prepared to use the Great Origin to continue cheating. As someone who had seen Wu-ming's main body the moment they formed the contract, Pester naturally understood that Wu-ming was special. Since it was a promise made by such a person, it definitely wouldn't be a lie. However, Pester still seemed to be a little hesitant. She moved her small hand and wanted to grab the cotton candy in front of her, but she couldn't make up her mind. Take it. Wu-ming grabbed Pester's hand and placed the cotton candy stick in her hand. If you need anything in the future, just tell your master. I'm your master. Although Pest was summoned as an Avenger, it didn't mean that he had revenge in his heart. It was just that the Avenger job was most suitable for him. After Wu-ming finished speaking, he didn't care about Pest's reaction. He held Pest's hand, which was still holding the cotton candy, and headed towards their destination. At this moment, Pest felt his heart warming up a little. Pester raised his head slightly and looked at Wu-ming. He started to think that his master wasn't that bad after all. One more thing, you have to build a good relationship with the other members of the community. Don't keep a straight face all the time, got it? Wu-ming was like a long-winded father, constantly reminding Pest. But Pest couldn't refute that. I got it. The favorability points that he had just added dropped instantly. Before this, Pest was ready to go all out. Even if Pester angered Wu-ming with her words and Wu-ming wanted to kill her, it didn't matter. But now, her words were restricted. In addition, Wu-ming was Pest's master. In short, Pest couldn't raise his head in front of Wu-ming now. However, when Wu-ming saw Pest's helpless expression, Wu-ming also felt helpless. Forget it. Let's take it slow. After all, Rome wasn't built in a day. He didn't want to force Pest. As long as there was change, it didn't matter if it took a long time. However, just as Wu-ming and Pest were chatting, the two had already arrived at their destination. As everyone knew, as the largest community in the Lower East District, No Name's land was very vast. Behind No Name's castle-shaped building, there was a large open space. No one knew what it was for, but it was very spacious. At this moment, dozens of tables were placed on the originally spacious ground. The tables were covered with a not-so-fancy tablecloth. Plates of different shapes and sizes were placed on the tablecloth, and on the plates were various delicacies from the box court world. Did you rob someone? Wu-ming couldn't help but shout when he saw this scene. After all, there were so many sumptuous delicacies. Whether it was the appearance, color, or even the aroma that Wu-ming smelled, it all represented the value of these delicacies. How could it be a robbery, Mr. Villo? Everyone bought these from a high-class restaurant together. Black Rabbit's very recognizable voice came from behind Wu-ming. Wu-ming turned his head. More than 100 people stood not far behind Wu-ming. Without a doubt, after seeing Wu-ming arrive, they secretly came out from the nearby building. Although Wu-ming used his psychic ability to detect them, he had to pretend that he didn't know. Among the community members, most of the children were lined up like bushes. Compared to these children, Black Rabbit, 16 Knights, and the others clearly had the advantage of height. Even Letitia, in her lowly form, was half a head taller than these children. Perhaps only Ren and Pest were as tall as these children of the community. Oh, Pest is actually holding hands with the Villo. Jun Asuka looked at Pest, who was holding hands with Wu-ming as if he didn't care about the situation. There's a situation. Haruai Hiroyuki, who was holding the three-furred cat, said simply, but the gossipy look in his eyes proved that this guy and Jiyu and Asuka were both problematic children. Hearing this, Pest also reacted. He immediately shook off Wu-ming's hand and shrunk to the side. I think the two of you have nothing better to do. Wu-ming looked at Jiyu and Asuka and Haruai Hiroyuki as if he had already given up. The heavens took pity on him. He really didn't have any messy thoughts about Pest, but being ridiculed by others really made Wu-ming a little unhappy. Wu-ming stopped looking at Jiyu and Asuka and Haruai Hiroyuki and looked at Rin and Black Rabbit. Since I'm already here, don't let the children stand there like idiots. Hurry up and eat. After all, they were supposed to celebrate and send off Wu-ming, so they had to let Wu-ming speak first. Otherwise, they would have already started eating. They didn't need to wait for Wu-ming. Wu-ming's sharp eyes noticed that many children were salivating. They hadn't eaten such good food in the past 3 years. It was the same even 3 years ago. After all, 3 years ago, most of their teeth weren't fully grown yet. Naturally, they couldn't eat such delicious food. More importantly, 3 years ago, some of the children didn't even know how to walk yet. In short, they were basking in Wooming's glory today. All right, everyone, since Mr. Villo is here, let's start the banquet. Oh, oh! The cheers of the children seemed to break through the sky. This made Wooming feel a little deafened. Sure enough, the children were hot-blooded and their voices were loud. Under Black Rabbit's encouragement and lead, the children, including Run, happily ran to the front of the tables and began the long-awaited journey of delicious food. Chapter 890. Even Pest was squeezed to the edge of the table by the crowd of over 100 children. However, Pest, who had never faced such a situation before, was instantly at a loss. He glanced at Wooming from time to time, trying to seek help from Wooming. However, only Wooming's lips responded to Pest. Eat as much as you can. If it was said that some of the children in No Name had enjoyed such delicacies before, then Pest was the only one who had never seen such a sumptuous meal in front of him. After all, Pest couldn't even fill his stomach when he came to the box court. After coming to the box court, Pest, who was bent on revenge, had never enjoyed such delicacies before. The considerate Wooming naturally wouldn't stop Pest from enjoying the delicacies. Pest looked at Wooming resentfully and was still hesitating. But soon, Pest was surrounded by Lily and a few other warm-hearted children. He half-willingly and half-forced to enjoy the delicacies with them. As expected, they are a bunch of children. Wooming looked at this heartwarming scene and was in a rather good mood. Although it's a banquet held with the excuse of celebrating you, that's just a passing remark. It's actually just to let the children of the community enjoy a rare celebration. 16 Knights walked to Wooming's side and crossed his arms behind his head. He looked at the children of the community eating heartily with a smile on his face. I don't know when our Lord 16 Knights has become so arrogant. Wooming crossed his arms and looked at 16 Knights with the same gaze that Juasudara and Kasuga Yayoi used to look at Wooming and Pest, mocking him. Oh, you want to play games with me? I'm very confident. 16 Knights' eyes flashed as he looked directly at Wooming. I don't want to play games with you. Wooming spread his arms and looked like he was surrendering. What a joke. Who could beat a problem child when it came talking? Wooming would not ask for a snub. By the way, when did you start preparing? Wooming was naturally referring to the banquet in front of him. The dozens of tables of delicacies in front of him must have taken a lot of effort. Even if he counted from the time Wooming left to find White Yiksha, time was rather tight. Letitia, who did not participate in the banquet and was standing behind Wooming, suddenly spoke up. Master, actually, everyone has been planning this banquet to celebrate the community's continuous progress. It's just that you didn't know about it. Because they had already started preparing, the members of No Name were able to prepare these delicacies in such a short period of time. At the same time, it was precisely because 16th Night had already started preparing for it that celebrating and sending off Wooming was really just a matter of convenience. In other words, 16th Night wasn't lying. Ahem. Indeed, we should hold a banquet like this. Wooming ignored 16th Night's teasing gaze as he coughed. Since the community had begun to develop steadily, they could not always lead a hard life. How could it be that they were eating chaff when they had a house full of gold? Of course, no matter what, it had to be done in moderation. By the way, since it's a banquet, Letitia, there's no need for you to be my maid anymore. Join the banquet with Black Rabbit and the others. Look, aren't they greeting you? Wooming was not wrong. Black Rabbit, Lily, Rin, and many other children of the community, as well as Jio Yuasuka and Kasuga Hikari, who had already joined the banquet, were all greeting them from time to time. I'm afraid they're calling for you, Master. Letitia playfully retorted. Letitia's words were not without reason. They might actually be calling for Wooming and the other two who had not yet joined the banquet. At that moment, Wooming could only smile and shake his head helplessly. Let's go. Although you're just a matter of convenience, we're still here to celebrate and send you off. After 16th Night finished speaking, she ignored Wooming and went straight to the banquet. I really don't know what to do with you guys. After all, Wu-ming had already said that he would follow the wishes of everyone in the community. If that was the case, then it was better to comply. Not sure if it was the universe or some other special space that stretched as far as the eye could see, there were large transparent yet opaque balls arranged in a regular pattern. A meteor was moving forward at a speed that normal people would not be able to see. It seemed as if there was no end to it. This was the gap between the worlds, a special space that had no end. Between the worlds. And that meteor was Wu-ming, who had left the box garden world. After happily attending the banquet, Wu-ming interacted with his no-name companions for a while, gave Letitia and Pest some instructions, and chatted with 16 Nights Reversal for a while. After that, Wu-ming left in an extremely natural manner, as though he was going out. There were no excessive goodbyes, no complicated words. It was really as if he was going out for a normal trip. At most, it could be considered as a long trip. Wu-ming left just like that. The main force of No Name understood that Wu-ming's long trip this time was not simple. However, no one directly said out loud. Instead, they treated it as normal. They did not think that Wu-ming would really not return. They all believed in Wu-ming and believed that he would definitely return soon. Just like what Wu-ming had said to White Yiksha and Vera previously, it was fine as long as they trusted Wu-ming. There was no need to care about anything else. And 16th Night, Black Rabbit, and the others did the same. As for why, perhaps, this was what they meant by companions. Wu-ming collected his scattered thoughts, shook his head, and suppressed these thoughts. He then increased his flying speed. Because Wu-ming's body had spent a long time in the box garden world, his entire dragon body had been greatly strengthened. Therefore, even if he did not deliberately activate his phoenix transformation and only revealed his original body, it was already easy for him to reach this speed. At this moment, Wu-ming was preparing to use his body to fly through the gap between the worlds to return to the route. Because Wu-ming's backup machine was guarding the route, the entire route was hidden. Even the entrance was not the one that Wu-ming had seen before. Apart from using a special method to enter, or Wu-ming removing the route's concealment, there was no other way to enter the route. However, Wu-ming's backup machine inside the route was like a lighthouse that guided Wu-ming through the fog at night. Wu-ming only needed to rely on his senses to constantly move forward, and he would be able to reach the route. For example, Wu-ming did not know what was going on. All he saw was the scenery around him blurring, and Wu-ming had returned to the route. Chapter 891. It felt as though he had fallen into an environment, but Wu-ming knew that it was just a special way for Wu-ming to enter the route through his backup machine. The route was still the same universe, and there were not many changes. On the platform at the center of the route, a white dragon that was smaller than Wu-ming's curled-up body and spread its wings. It lay there quietly as though it was asleep, but at the same time, it looked like it had lost its life. In short, it was quite contradictory. That was Wu-ming's backup machine. It wasn't wrong to say that it was alive, but it wasn't wrong to say that it wasn't alive either. If you really had to name it, it was a mechanical life form mixed with magic. Like a swallow returning to its nest, Wu-ming flew to the platform naturally. The small platform automatically expanded a little after Wu-ming flew over, just enough to accommodate Wu-ming and his backup machine. Even so, the space around them did not change at all, as though it was infinite space. That was not wrong. After all, this was the route, and there was no concept of size in the space inside. Not to mention space, there was not even the concept of time. It was just like the route of the M-shaped moon, where everything was chaotic. The route was essentially the same. Apart from Wu-ming and the route Black Mud, which was born from the route, no one could walk out of the route alive after entering. After landing on the platform, Wu-ming had no intention of putting away his backup machine. He continued to let the backup machine act as the host and take control of the route. After all, Wu-ming would have to leave again soon. Although it doesn't feel real, I've become a lot stronger. Looking at the backup machine next to him, Wu-ming could feel that his body had indeed grown a lot in size at such a close distance. Compared to the backup machine in the route, Wu-ming was now many times bigger. Wu-ming even felt like the backup machine beside him was a figurine. Although Wu Ming's body could freely expand or shrink, the size of his body in the realm of worlds was something that Wu Ming subconsciously controlled. In other words, Wu Ming's current size was what Wu Ming subconsciously thought was appropriate. This meant that Wu Ming's strength had also increased by leaps and bounds. After confirming the increase in his strength once again, Wu Ming made up his mind. It was time to find trouble with Gidia. But before that, Wu Ming had to act on the promise he made in the box world. He had to help Pest summon Wesley in Latine, punish the person behind Galji's words, and finally, and most importantly, the problem of absolute evil in the box world. However, Wu Ming didn't intend to let himself handle these matters. Wu Ming was going to let Kalas help Wu Ming with these matters. It wasn't that Wu Ming was lazy. Kalas could totally do it, and the results might be several times better than Wu Ming's. Kalas's brain alone was hundreds of millions of times faster than a human computer. In addition, Kalas was a product of the mysterious realm, so her efficiency was many times higher than Wu Ming's. She could do these things with half the effort. That was why Wu Ming had the idea of letting Kalas do it for him. When Kalas and Wu Ming's bodies were lost in the box world, Wu Ming was troubled by certain things. Now, he had finally found Kalas. If everything was left to Kalas, what would Wu Ming do? Wu Ming was naturally going to make a trip to the seventh singularity. As early as when Wu Ming obtained his dependent avatar, he could already multitask. In other words, even if his consciousness stayed in the root, he could still control the spirit-based avatar to go to the singularity in real time. It was just that Wu Ming didn't like to do it. Wu Ming felt that it was a little perfunctory. If he got used to it, he was afraid that the future Wu Ming would become a central processing machine. Although it would not cause schizophrenia, Wu Ming still liked to put all his consciousness into the spirit-based avatar and use it to encounter anything in the singularity. Such words made Wu Ming feel like he was more like a human than the mysterious and noble origin dragon. Taking a step back, Wu Ming had already left the trivial things to Kalas to prepare. If he stayed in the root, he would have nothing to do. So, he might as well put all his attention into the spirit-based avatar and seriously deal with everything that he encountered. I suffered a big loss at Gorgon's hands. How can I not get back at him? After temporarily taking over control of the standby machine, Wu Ming lay on the platform. Some of the necessary details still had to be handled by Wu Ming himself. After that, he could leave it to Kalas. I wonder how Tachika and the others are doing. According to Wu Ming's speculation, Tachika and the others should have reached the last singularity by now. Just in time, I can solve the problem of absolute evil while I'm at it. He decided to solve the problem of the singularity as soon as possible, and then go on a crusade against Gidia with Tachika and the others. Wu Ming stretched out his dragon claw and tapped the empty space in front of him. A naked spirit-based avatar appeared in front of Wu Ming, and the face was exactly the face of Wu Ming's human form. Then, Wu Ming spoke to Enkidu and Kalas. Enkidu, Kalas, I'm counting on you. Wu Ming meant for Enkidu and Kalas to accompany Wu Ming's spirit base to the singularity in the form of avatars. Enkidu didn't say anything. Instead, the golden heaven lock wrapped around Wu Ming's dragon claw arrived in front of Wu Ming's spirit base like a swimming dragon, causing a series of clanking sounds. The wedge at the tip of the heaven lock gently tapped Wu Ming's spirit base. In an instant, a silver-white chain appeared on Wu Ming's body. Not only that, but the silver-white chain also had a hint of gold, which made it look quite extraordinary. From this, it could be seen that Enkidu had already connected his avatar to Wu Ming's spirit base. Next was Kalas's turn. A buzzing sound that sounded like an auditory hallucination appeared inside the Great Source. However, this wasn't an auditory hallucination, but rather the sound of Kalas's movements. Wu Ming even felt his head vibrating slightly. Instantly, an invisible and mysterious signal, like an electric wave, was emitted from the dragon horn headpiece on Wu Ming's head. In the next second, a headpiece that looked like a dragon horn crown appeared on Wu Ming's avatar's head, shining with a light that seemed to be full of wisdom. At this moment, Kalas had also completed the connection with Wu Ming's spirit base. Next, it's absolute evil. Chapter 892. With that, Wuming waved his hand, and Azidakaha's three-headed dragon body appeared in the center of Wuming's dragon claw. Wuming tapped Azidakaha's body lightly, and for some unknown reason, Azidakaha's body instantly disintegrated into mysterious particles, and all of them were absorbed into the newly created spirit base by Wuming. In that case, Kalas, you must complete the absolute evil problem first. After all, if you did not complete the absolute evil problem first, this spirit base would not be able to be used in the singularity. Yes, master. The dragon horn on Wuming's head responded. Then, Wuming gave Kalas the authority. After everything was ready, Wuming tapped his spirit base lightly. Go! A summoning magic circle appeared under the spirit base's feet, and in an instant, Wuming's spirit base disappeared. Kalas, Enkidu, I'll leave it to you. Wuming finished and fell into a deep sleep. The moment Wuming fell into a deep sleep, the golden chains wrapped around Wuming's dragon claw rattled, and as if they were endless, they danced around the entire route, as if they were protecting Wuming, who was at the center of the platform. At the same time, the dragon horn on Wuming's head also glowed, as if it was using Wuming's authority to do something. Soon after, the entire route fell into darkness once more. Only the golden chains that covered the route and Wuming's dragon horn headdress shone, both of them fulfilling their duty to the fullest. In the northern fir forest, in an inconspicuous bush, a magic array suddenly appeared and glowed brightly. The light of the magic circle disappeared, and the magic circle lost its form, but a figure appeared in the bush. How did I end up here? Wuming walked out of the bush, took off the grass and other things on his body, and used magic to transform into a set of Uruk clothes. Wuming began to complain. By the way, this should be Gorgon's territory, right? How did I end up here? When Wuming inserted the spirit base into the Mesopotamia singularity, he clearly aimed in the direction of Uruk, and Wuming thought that no matter what, he could at least get closer to the Uruk. But instead of getting close to the Uruk, he ended up near the enemy's base. Although Gorgon said that she would not come out of her temple before she recovered, if Wuming, who once heavily injured her, appeared in front of Gorgon's gate again, she might not be able to resist the urge to come out and beat him. In any case, I should leave this place first. As for the idea of taking advantage of this opportunity to kill Gorgon, Wuming had considered it before, but the real enemy was probably not Gorgon. Wuming thought of the dream he had the night when he left the Quetzalcoatl's territory. At that time, Wuming only sensed that there was a stronger enemy behind all this, and according to his discussion with Gilgamesh and Merlin, that existence was probably the real Tiamat. He did not know what effect eliminating Gorgon would have on Tiamat. If it could weaken Tiamat, it would be best, but if Gorgon's death caused Tiamat to appear in person, it would be really bad. Kalas hadn't dealt with the absolute evil issue yet, and Wuming's current spiritual base was temporarily no match for Tiamat, so he had to wait for a while. Then, according to his own judgment, Wuming began to move in the direction of the Uruk. In order to avoid encountering magical beasts that might exist in the fir forest, Wuming did not choose to directly pass through the fir forest. Instead, he chose to detour to the highlands in the southwest, preparing to return to the Uruk from there. Even if it was a magical beast, it was impossible to run to such a desolate place. That was why Wuming chose this place. Standing on a bare mountainous platform, Wuming couldn't help but complain. If the magical beast can detour from the mountainous area, perhaps the Uruk will be doomed. But that was impossible. Gorgon alone couldn't produce a large number of magical beasts with the ability to fly or travel in the highlands. Besides, if it could, perhaps Gorgon would have done so long ago, and there would be no need for it to fight to the death with the humans on the magical beast front. Could it be that Gorgon was waiting for something? In Wuming's opinion, this was too unrealistic, and as a non-human servant, Wuming naturally heard it clearly. Snore! As the growl got closer, Wuming scanned his surroundings. Wuming was standing on a small platform, but even if it was a platform, it was still a highland. Therefore, if there were creatures walking from a low place to a high place, Wuming wouldn't be able to see those creatures with his eyes because of the wide platform. And if those creatures spread to surround them, not to mention ordinary people, even the slightly weaker servants could only wait for death. That's right, Wuming was surrounded. Wuming's mental power clearly transmitted the images of the creatures that were constantly spreading to Wuming's mind. There were some red-haired magical beasts that were more than 2 meters tall and looked like hyenas. Yilidim. Silent's eyes shone with a bright light. The last time he came to this singularity, Wuming saw a magical beast called Yilidim produced by Gorgon, but they seemed to be a lot bigger than the last time I saw them. As mentioned before, these Yilidim were more than 2 meters tall. Roughly speaking, they were more than 2.5 meters tall, close to 3 meters tall. The Yilidim that Wuming saw last time weren't that big. At most, they were more than 2 meters tall. As a result, these Yilidim that appeared in front of Wuming were close to 3 meters tall. I'm afraid that Gorgon is really focused on healing his injuries. Otherwise, how could there be so many Yilidim? At present, only Gorgon didn't go out to heal his injuries and focused on producing enhanced magical beasts could explain why these Yilidim were so big. Are they treating me as prey? Wuming couldn't help but scratch his head. They should be able to realize that Wuming wasn't a human, or they couldn't see the difference in strength between the two sides. It was fine if they couldn't feel the difference in strength, but Wuming was emitting a very dangerous aura at the moment. Magical beasts were also beasts, and their perception of danger wasn't as slow as humans. But even if they felt Wuming's powerful aura, the Yilidim were still quite bold and bravely surrounded Wuming. It seems that there is a leader behind the command. It was precisely because of the existence of a leader that these Yilidim didn't retreat because of Wuming's aura. After all, hyenas relied on numbers to compete with leopards and lions for food. Chapter 893. Unfortunately, at this moment, Wuming was neither an ordinary person nor a weak servant. He was a divine servant with an extremely powerful spirit base index. It could only be said that the leader of Yilidim had found the wrong prey. Wuming would treat them as prey instead. While Wuming was thinking, all the Yilidim climbed up the platform and completely surrounded Wuming. However, these Yilidim did not launch an attack. They just surrounded Wuming as if waiting for something. Then the earth began to tremble. Boom, boom, boom. A behemoth walked up from the mountainous platform. It was a red-haired, golden-haired kobold with a rag around its waist. Because it walked upright, it was much taller than the other Yilidim, and its body was full of muscles. Compared to Wuming, it was like a small giant. Its head was the same as the head of the Yilidim, but this kobold's eyes were blood red. There were no whites or eyeballs. They were completely blood red, just like a berserker who had gone berserk from all the killing. The key point was that this kobold exuded a much stronger aura than the other Yilidim. It seemed that this kobold was the leader of these Yilidim. Roar! The kobold roared at Wuming as if it was saying something, but ordinary people could not understand the language of the demonic beasts. However, Wuming unexpectedly understood. The kobold's general idea was more or less like this. I am Yilidim, one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. I am also a son of the mother goddess. Why do you betray the mother goddess, Lachum? This made Wuming confused. How did he become Lachum? Although Wuming did not know why the kobold called him Lachum, he understood one thing. The kobold walking upright in front of him was different from other mass-produced demonic beasts. It was probably the real Yilidim of the 11 sons of Tiamat. The original Yilidim alone was far more intimidating than the mass-produced Yilidim. If this Yilidim was converted into a servant, it was probably a god-level servant, and a very strong one. There were also levels in the god level. Take Absolute Evil's avatar, for example. Absolute Evil's two-headed dragon avatar was mostly a 5-digit number, which was a god-level disaster. But first of all, anything above 5 digits was a god level. And if the Yilidim in front of Wuming was a god-level servant, it was at least a top-level god-level servant. Legend has it that the god Kingu led the 11 sons of Tiamat to fight against the Sumer gods. Although the result was a defeat, the fact that the 11 sons of Tiamat could fight against the Sumer gods was enough to show the strength of the 11 sons of Tiamat. If such an existence interfered with the demonic beasts in the north wall, even if there were many servants on the front line, it would be quite difficult to resist. Not to mention that this guy seemed to be quite smart. As for why, just based on Wu Ming's encounter with Yulidim in this mountainous region. Wu Ming wanted to bypass the demonic beasts in the north wall through the southwest mountains and return to Uruk. And these Yulidim happened to ambush Wu Ming. Obviously, these Yulidim came here in advance. In that case, could Wu Ming think that these Yulidim were also preparing to bypass the demonic beasts and attack the Uruk? If it was really an irrational demonic beast, it wouldn't choose to go through the mountains. Only in the presence of this Yulidim leader would these Yulidim follow the leader into the mountains. Perhaps it accidentally found Wu Ming coming out of the fir forest, so the kobold Yulidim chose to ambush him. I don't care what Lachim you are. You just want to hunt me. After Wu Ming finished speaking, the kobold Yulidim showed a human-like smile, as if admitting that Wu Ming was right. What a coincidence. I also want to hunt you, honorable of the 11 sons. Wu Ming said. The distorted golden seven-headed snake staff emerged from the ripples beside him and fell into Wu Ming's palm. Wu Ming's spirit base was Rider, but that didn't stop Wu Ming from acting as a caster. Roar! The original Yulidim roared. Along with Yulidim's roar, the other mass-produced Yulidim rushed toward Wu Ming. At that moment, it was as if a sea of red and yellow was about to devour Wu Ming. Wu Ming didn't panic. He tapped the seven-headed snake staff on the ground gently, and letter-like special runes covered the ground, which were trampled by the charging Yulidim. Crack! With a crack, the Yulidim closest to Wu Ming was instantly frozen. Although the ice was very thick, the frozen Yulidim could be seen clearly. For example, the frozen Yulidim closest to Wu Ming still had a ferocious expression on its face. It was simply lifelike. Whether it was the rippling hair, due to running and jumping in the ice, or the unknown shredded flesh between its teeth, Wu Ming saw it all. Feeling the chill of the ice, some of the unfrozen Yulidim in the rear felt a little afraid and took 2 steps back. But because of the original Yulidim, they didn't dare to run away directly. Even if the minions are strengthened, they are still minions. Silent Wonder tapped the ground with his seven-headed snake staff once more, shattering the ice that sealed Yulidim. Yulidim and the rest of the ice turned into fine powder and scattered on ground. The ground was covered in a layer of white, without a single trace of blood to be seen. This made the mass-produced Yulidim even more terrified. Some of them even turned around and ran away in fear. But in the next second, these mass-produced Yulidim were smashed into pieces by several other Yulidim that flew out of nowhere. Disgusting purplish-black blood splattered all over the ground, and indistinguishable broken limbs and flesh splattered everywhere. The remaining nerves made some of the flesh move twice, but it soon returned to normal. How cruel! Wu Ming narrowed his eyes and looked at the kobold Yulidim who had retracted its hand. He clearly saw that the kobold had casually grabbed a few Yulidim around it and threw them at the fleeing Yulidim. It seemed that the kobold didn't treat these mass-produced Yulidim as its own kind, but as tools instead. Roar! The kobold Yulidim roared a few more times, as if reprimanding these Yulidim for being useless. When the remaining Yulidim heard their leader's words, they slowly retreated from the platform. In an instant, only Wu Ming and the kobold were left on the platform. Chapter 894. Does this mean you want to duel me? Wu Ming saw through Yulidim's intentions. It wasn't hard to understand. After all, even if the mass-produced Yulidim rushed forward, it would be useless. As expected of the 11 sons of Tiamat. This guy isn't simple. He has some brains. Wu Ming thought to himself. Moreover, since he still chose to duel Wu Ming after seeing Wu Ming's methods, it meant that he was confident in his own strength. Moreover, he didn't show any mercy when dealing with the mass-produced Yulidim that were scared out of their wits. He didn't even treat the mass-produced Ulidim as his own kind and directly capture them as weapons to kill the few mass-produced Ulidim that tried to escape. In addition, this prototype Ulidim brought the mass-produced Ulidim to the southwest mountains. It was very likely that he wanted to bypass the front line of the demonic beasts and go to the Uruk. Such a smart, powerful, and resourceful demonic beast. If this guy was allowed to return to the fir forest, who knew how much damage it would cause to the demonic beast's front line? I can't let him go. This was Wu Ming's thought at the moment. Coincidentally, Ulidim also had the same thought at the moment. From the beginning, Ulidim commanded the mass-produced Ulidim to ambush and hunt. In fact, he was preparing to devour the traitor of the 11 sons of Tiamat. The cunning kobold Ulidim clearly knew that his compatriot Lachamu, Wu Ming, had betrayed the mother goddess. Hunting Lachamu would not only help the mother goddess get rid of a scourge, but it would also strengthen itself by devouring its own kind. Why not? I can't let him go. This was also Ulidim's thought at the moment. A servant and a demonic beast looked at each other. A battle was about to break out. Roar! Ulidim roared. He didn't use any weapons and rushed at Wu Ming barehanded. It seemed that he was very confident in his physical strength. Wu Ming, on the other hand, used the Yggdrasil spell on the staff of Anzirgong to test Ulidim. Fire, ice, holy light, darkness, lightning, and even poison. All sorts of magical attacks were unleashed by the staff of Anzirgong, but none of them had any effect on Ulidim. However, no matter what, these spells should have been able to hinder Ulidim for a moment or two. In the end, Ulidim didn't seem to be hindered at all. In the blink of an eye, it had reached Wu Ming's side and used its sharp claws to viciously swipe at Wu Ming. Although Tiamat and the 11 beasts were all defeated and killed by Sumer, this didn't mean that the 11 beasts were weak. On the contrary, they were very strong. The 11 sons that Tiamat gave birth to did not possess the authority of a god because they were demonic beasts. They were only born as demonic beasts that far surpassed the Sumer gods in terms of physical strength. They perfectly matched the strength of the demonic beasts born by the gods of creation. The magic of the staff of Anzirgong had no effect on Ulidim, one of the 11 demonic beasts that could fight against the gods. Wu Ming, who had guessed this result, used the substitute magic of the staff of Anzirgong to block Ulidim's claw attack. Then, Wu Ming put the staff of Anzirgong aside and let it float beside him. Then, he unhurriedly took out an ancient book from the golden ripples and opened it. It was the nameless spellbook that Wu Ming hadn't used for a long time. The nameless spellbook recorded all the magic related to YGHDRASILL. Logically speaking, it should not have any offensive capabilities. The only reason the Shuo Yu Mansion's temple could use the power of the nameless spellbook to release magic was because the Shuo Yu Mansion was a silent temple. Therefore, he had a deep understanding of the useless Wu Ming of the nameless spellbook. As early as the root, Wu Ming had already transformed the nameless spellbook into a spellbook that could release the magic recorded in the book. If this was put in the lunar world, it would be the original spellbook of the original spellbook. In short, it was a super dangerous original spellbook. Since Wu Ming wanted to make a cameo appearance as caster, then he would definitely make a good cameo appearance. For example, he would use this spellbook. At the moment when Wu Ming took out the spellbook, Ulidim, who felt a sense of crisis, quickly retreated and took the initiative to open a distance from Wu Ming. As a magical beast, its beast instinct told it that if it rushed up, it was likely to be injured. It turned out that Ulidim's feeling was not wrong. A wind blade appeared around Wu Ming. It was a penetrating magic that could not be defended against, and its level was naturally the 10th order. Even if Ulidim's physical fitness was high, it would still be afraid when it encountered penetrating damage. You're quite alert. Wu Ming smiled. Indeed, if Ulidim rushed up just now, it would indeed be injured or even lose an arm or a leg, so Ulidim and Wu Ming opened a distance. However, Silent Cry's initial goal wasn't to cast a penetrative tier 10 spell, but rather a supreme spell. The penetrative tier 10 spell was just a side dish that came along with it. At the moment when Wu Ming took out the nameless spellbook, He activated the plural supreme magic recorded in the nameless spellbook and entered the pre-roll. The supreme magic of Yggdrasil was a special skill with a very long pre-roll time. Generally, it was either an ambush in advance or using a krypton item that could shorten the pre-roll time to achieve the effect of instant activation. The supreme magic recorded in the nameless spellbook was not immune to this drawback, and it also had a very long pre-roll time. But coincidentally, Wombing happened to have a krypton item that could shorten the pre-roll time to instant activation. If the kobold Ulidim had rushed up, Wombing would have immediately used the krypton item, and Ulidim would have been covered by the supreme magic in an instant. But because of the penetrating magic surrounding Wombing, Ulidim did not rush up to Wombing, so Wombing did not activate the krypton item. At the same time, because supreme magic users did not have any attack power when they were pre-roll, Ulidim was not too worried. It was only a little wary because of the penetrating magic surrounding Wombing. Simply put, it did not discover the existence of a supreme magic spell. The reason why the 11 magical beasts could not defeat the gods of Sumer was because they did not have the authority of the gods. In the end, they were defeated and killed by the gods who had the authority of the gods. And the plural supreme magic was comparable to the attack of the gods' authority. What Ulidim did not know was that although it had opened a distance from Wombing, it was still within the range of the supreme magic spell. Simply put, Ulidim was already half a step into the kingdom of death. Bang! Chapter 895. Wombing suddenly crushed the hourglass-like crystal in his hand. In an instant, extreme energy covered the surroundings with Wombing as the center. Sensing the danger, Ulidim's heart trembled. The other mass-produced Ulidim also fled in all directions, but it was all in vain. The white light of destruction covered them all in an instant. With Wombing as the center, a thick pillar of light appeared in the entire southwest mountain region. The pillar shot straight into the sky. The entire Mesopotamia shook as if there was a major earthquake. Even the Abif mountain in the northwest was shaken. Although they were demonic beasts, they were still children raised by Mother Earth. At this moment, the Earth was angry. Although the demonic beasts that were attacking the North Wall didn't panic to the point of running away, they subconsciously stopped their current actions due to the earthquake and stood rooted to the ground. Leonidas I, who was commanding the soldiers, was also shocked by the earthquake. However, he quickly realized that the earthquake wouldn't affect the North Wall much. Now, therefore, Leonidas, I took the opportunity to command the soldiers to deal a heavy blow to the demonic beasts that were rooted to the ground due to their instincts. But then, the demonic beasts seemed to have been commanded and retreated one after another. Leonidas and the soldiers weren't surprised. They didn't chase after the demonic beasts. Instead, they cleaned up the battlefield, rescuing the wounded, retrieving the corpses of the soldiers, cleaning up the wreckage of the demonic beasts. There were still many things to do. What happened over there? After that, Leonidas, I looked in the direction of the pillar of light that was still continuing. Leonidas, I shook his head silently. As the front line, all he needed to do was to defend. Anyway, King Gilgamesh and the Uruk must have seen it. There was no need for him to worry. Although the pterosaur acted as a carrier pigeon, it's still not as good as the wind demon. Leonidas, I muttered to himself. He turned around and joined the ranks of cleaning up the battlefield. Leonidas, I was right. The giant pillar of light covered such a wide area and was so powerful that the entire Mesopotamia could see it, not to mention the Uruk. The Uruk people all knelt on the ground. They all thought that God had appeared, and they all prayed devoutly. At the French skylight at the top of the tower, the sage king, Gilgamesh, who had returned from searching for the elixir of immortality for half a year, and the current chief priest, Siduri, stood together at the window and looked towards the southwest. Originally, Siduri had rushed over to report the earthquake to Gilgamesh in a panic. However, under the influence of Gilgamesh's calm aura, Siduri had also become calm. When the earthquake gradually subsided and the pillar of light slowly faded, Gilgamesh finally spoke. Hyunryong's return has already caused such a huge impact. How ostentatious. Upon hearing this, Siduri's face lit up with joy. King Gilgamesh, are you saying that Lord Hyunryong is back? Siduri was still wondering what made King Gilgamesh put aside his work and observe. It turned out that Lord Hyunryong was back. Since Wuming and Gorgon were both injured, Gorgon was seriously injured and returned to his temple to recuperate, and Wuming directly disappeared. The Uruk people fell into a temporary panic. After that, it was Gilgamesh who spoke again to cheer the people up. The people who had not completely separated themselves from the gods naturally fell into a depression once again because of Hyunryong's return to fight against the enemy. The most serious one was Siduri. As a god who sincerely cared for the people of Mesopotamia, Hyunryong's temple was close to the Uruk, and he worked for the people. Later on, he almost replaced the idol Ishtar as the Uruk city god. This made Siduri's devotion to Hyunryong surpass that of most other gods. She was even willing to sacrifice her life for Hyunryong. However, Hyunryong sacrificed himself in the process of fighting against the enemy god and disappeared again. How could this not make Siduri's heart not ache? However, as the chief priest, Siduri could not abandon her duties because of heartache and sadness. Perhaps because Gilgamesh noticed that Hyunryong's departure was a big blow to the Uruk. King Gilgamesh made a new speech to cheer up Siduri and even the entire Uruk people and restore their previous extremely optimistic state. However, this did not mean that Siduri would not be sad about Hyunryong's departure. Almost every few days, Siduri would go to the temple abandoned by Hyunryong to pray. Therefore, Siduri was quite excited when she heard the news of Hyunryong's return. Probably Hyunryong wanted to go from the highlands in the southwest to the Uruk, but he encountered Tiamat's 11 magical beasts and fought with them. As Gilgamesh spoke, he returned to the throne behind him, sat down, picked up the clay tablet, and began to deal with various affairs. My king, should I send someone to welcome Lord Xianlong? Greeting the return of a deity that he had devoutly believed in was something that should be done. Not only that, since Wuming could fight with the enemy in the southwest, it must mean that there were enemies there. Since there were enemies, it was hard to guarantee that there would be reinforcements. In the current situation, if more than half of the 11 sons of Tiamat besieged Hyunryong, there would definitely be an accident. A lot of things had happened in the past 6 months. After Gorgon was seriously injured by Wuming's self-destruction, he had been holed up in his temple in the fir forest all day long. Because of the battle between Hyunryong and Gorgon, the magical beasts produced by Gorgon were basically affected, causing a lot of casualties. The North Wall was not attacked for a long time. However, on a certain day, 3 months later, a large number of magical beasts flocked to the North Wall, and there were 11 magical beast commanders with strength comparable to gods. They called themselves the 11 Sons of Tiamat, and the existence that looked like Enkidu was one of them. If King Gilgamesh did not summon many servants to assassinate the 11 commanders at the cost of sacrificing themselves to buy time for the North Wall, perhaps the North Wall would have been breached by now. Even if Gorgon himself came in person, he would definitely choose to retreat after receiving that attack. Don't worry about Hyunryong, Gilgamesh said, while constantly changing the clay tablet in his hand. One by one, he quickly corrected the instructions on the clay tablet. Gilgamesh saw the attack just now. That kind of attack was like the combination of multiple military noble phantoms. Even Gorgon would certainly be injured, let alone the magical beasts. But Siduri still wanted to say something, but at this time, Gilgamesh put down the clay tablet in his hand and looked up as if he could not stand Siduri anymore. Which servants are there in the south now? Chapter 896. Siduri's veiled face revealed a hint of joy. Judging from King Gilgamesh's words, did he agree to support and welcome Lord Hyunryong back? Yes, my king. Chaldea has just been sent by my king to the southern jungle to support the feathered serpent god. However, before Siduri could finish her sentence, Gilgamesh instantly interrupted her. Then let Chaldea welcome Hyunryong. Moreover, they have formed a bond with Hyunryong. They are the best candidates. After Gilgamesh finished speaking, he once again picked up the clay tablet with his clawed hand. At this moment, there were still many things waiting for him to deal with in Mesopotamia. He couldn't afford to waste a single second. If he delayed any longer, he wouldn't even have time to sleep. Bond? My king, are you referring to the matter of the master of Chaldea possessing Lord Hyunryong's scale? Siduri clearly remembered that when Merlin brought Chaldea and her party to the Uruk, when they approached the shrine of Hyunryong in the Uruk, the girl took out the scale because it was hot and was coincidentally discovered by Siduri. After seeing that the scale was connected to the shrine, Siduri reported the matter to King Gilgamesh. According to the master of Chaldea, the scale was a gift from a friend who had helped them in other singularities. It was said that it would be useful in this singularity. Siduri still remembered King Gilgamesh's reaction at that time. After learning about this matter, King Gilgamesh did not seem to care. However, when he met the master of Chaldea, the first thing he asked was to see the hot dragon scale. He was obviously anxious, but he had to show a calm expression. Siduri did not know what to say about King Gilgamesh. After confirming that it was a dragon scale condensed from Hyunryong's magic, Gilgamesh was very happy to give the master of Chaldea and her followers an extraordinary trial. At that time, Siduri wondered if King Gilgamesh wanted to kill Chaldea and her party. After that, it was said that the people in the Chaldea organization were in an uproar. It would be a joke if they died in the hands of their allies after passing through 6 singularities. However, because of this, Chaldea also confirmed that King Gilgamesh was really a former tyrant. In short, a certain person who sounded like a loser to Siduri had a shadow in her heart. In the end, it was King Gilgamesh's court magician, Merlin, who brought Chaldea and her party back. Under the condition of not touching King Gilgamesh's bottom line, he helped Chaldea and her party a little. This allowed Chaldea and her party to barely pass the trial. This king is especially strict with outsiders who suddenly join because the entire Mesopotamia has become extremely dangerous. Although you barely passed, you completed it with the help of Merlin. This is enough to prove that you are not qualified. You should train in the Uruk for a period of time. First, bastards. Siduri wanted to complain. It was King Gilgamesh who was interested in Chaldea and her party because King Hyunryong entrusted them with a dragon scale and went overboard. However, what King Gilgamesh said was true. The current situation in Mesopotamia was extremely dangerous. The strengthened demons and the number of demon commanders that still existed not only made the northern wall miserable, but also made Uruk, the rear of the army, constantly vigilant. One of the 11 sons of Tiamat, a 4-legged serpent-type demon known as Musu Hushio. Half a year ago, when the 11 demon commanders appeared, they led a large number of Musu Hushio to attack Uruk from underground. Because of the sudden attack, they had to sacrifice a servant called Saber, swordsman, summoned by King Gilgamesh to suppress the demons that attacked from the ground. However, the demonic beast commander, who personally led the demonic beast to attack, was also killed. In terms of war losses, neither side gained an advantage. The demonic beast lost an extremely powerful demonic beast commander, and the human side lost an equally powerful servant. Although there were no more incidents of monsters attacking from underground, Gilgamesh still carried out a defense against the monsters underground. In a very short period of time, he successfully developed a powerful barrier called Nabiston's Tooth and buried it under the Uruk. Not only that, King Gilgamesh also carried out a series of defenses against the sky, the 2 rivers, the Persian Gulf, and even the highlands in the southwest. Even Siduri had to admit that King Gilgamesh was really a genius. But strangely, since the beginning of Mushio Hushio's surprise attack on the Uruk, there were no such monster attacks in the past 6 months. Perhaps they were too cautious, but almost all the monsters attack from the north. However, King Gilgamesh proposed the possibility of waiting for the humans to relax and then take them down in one fell swoop. Therefore, even if there were no monster attacks, they had to be vigilant in the rear. Therefore, when Gilgamesh said that the master of Chaldea was not qualified, he was not completely looking for an excuse. There was a certain reason behind it. After that, King Gilgamesh arranged the so-called Chaldean embassy for Chaldea's group in the Uruk. He really let them do a variety of things in the Uruk, such as building walls, weeding, feeding livestock, shearing sheep, removing rats in the sewer, and other things that were quite boring but interesting. The significance of this was that Chaldea's master and her followers had successfully integrated into the Uruk. And just yesterday, after Siduri reported the situation of Chaldea's master to King Gilgamesh received information from the Quetzalcoatl through the small pterosaur. A large number of monsters had been discovered in the southern jungles, and there were even signs of monsters coming ashore from the Persian Gulf. However, the monsters had become their own people, and the Quetzalcoatl worked together with Gilgamesh's soldiers to repel them. Although such a situation was rare, monsters would invade from the southwest jungles and the Persian Gulf from time to time. But since it was related to monsters, the Quetzalcoatl would still report it to Gilgamesh. However, Gilgamesh did not pay much attention to it. After all, monsters did try to invade from the south jungles and the Persian Gulf from time to time. Therefore, after realizing that Chaldea's group had enough time to train, Gilgamesh gave them their first mission, which was to support the Quetzalcoatl in the south. However, Gilgamesh understood one thing at this moment. Through the light beam on the southwest plateau today, he could confirm that the monster commanders seemed to be planning something again. However, when he thought about how they had coincidentally bumped into Wuming, Gilgamesh faintly wanted to laugh. This was the so-called coming at the right time. Chapter 897. Didn't Merlin and the servant he brought back also go with Chaldea's people? Use the small pterosaur provided by the Quetzalcoatl to convey the news to Merlin, and let him tell the Chaldea's people that after meeting with Hyunryong, they must listen to Hyunryong's instructions just like this king. Although the Uruk also had carrier pigeons, ever since the Quetzalcoatl turned against them, the Uruk began to use the small communication pterosaur provided by the Quetzalcoatl. It had to be said that this small pterosaur was better than the carrier pigeons in all aspects. That's all. We'll talk about other things when Hyunryong returns to the Uruk. After Gilgamesh finished speaking, he stopped talking and focused on dealing with various matters on the clay tablet. Yes, King, I'll do it right away. Siduri responded and left the throne room. Southern jungle. The hot and humid environment made the group of people who came from the Uruk to support them suffer, especially Gadatsi. The people accompanying her were either servants or subservants. Only Gadatsi was a pure human. Moreover, the magic concentration in Kanzaki was much higher than in the sixth singularity. If it weren't for the magic dress specially made for Gadatsi by Leonardo da Vinci, perhaps Gadatsi wouldn't be able to move so freely in this singularity. However, even with the magic dress, the magic atmosphere of Kanzaki and the humid tropical jungle still made Gadatsi breathless. Leopard Man, San, haven't we arrived yet? Matthew, who noticed that his senpai was quite uncomfortable at the moment, asked the servant leading them in front. The God-sama, who claimed to be the Leopard Man, but seemed to be a comedic character. As Matthew understood, this servant looked like an older girl wearing a leopard costume. The item on the ground that looked like a spear was more like a large toy than a weapon. Right away, the Leopard Man, who was defined as a strange servant by Matthew, turned around and smiled at Matthew rather reluctantly. Matthew was already immune to the Leopard Man's joking because she said this sentence several times. However, Matthew still noticed that the Leopard Man's expression was slightly depressed at the moment. Leopard Man, San, are you okay? Matthew, who fully displayed his little personality, asked with concern. It's okay. How could the Leopard Man be frightened by the earthquake just now? There was no doubt that Miss Leopard Man was frightened. That was what Matthew judged. The appearance of the giant pillar of light caused the earthquake, and at that time, they happened to meet the Leopard Man outside the jungle who was about to lead them. Because the sudden earthquake was very close to the southern jungle, Gadatsi directly fell to the ground. Matthew barely supported his body to protect Gadatsi, so as to prevent the surrounding trees from collapsing and causing harm to Gadatsi. However, it seemed that the earth and trees in Kanagawa were extremely tough, and there were no signs of trees collapsing or the ground cracking. In the end, the leopard people, who had senses that surpassed that of wild beasts, were the ones who received the most severe effects, to the point of being ridiculously severe. The leopard man was so scared that he buried his head in the ground. Although this ostrich-like behavior was worthy of ridicule, what was more worthy of ridicule was that burying one's head in the ground should be more affected by the earthquake. After all, it was the earth that was shaking. In short, after the earthquake ended for some time, the leopard man pulled his head out of the ground in a daze, and he looked like he was about to leave. After that, when the leopard man led the way for them, he looked like he was trembling with fear. In short, the leopard man at this moment was very unreliable. Matthew, who understood this, sighed helplessly, but even if they didn't know when they would reach their destination, they still had to go on. Thinking of this, Matthew looked at the cloaked girl who followed them silently behind them, the servant who claimed to be Anna. Anna, who was good at using scythes, didn't panic much during the earthquake. She was almost unaffected by the earthquake. It could only be said that even if she was petite and looked weak, she was still worthy of being called a servant. Subconsciously, Matthew felt that he was still immature. As for the leopard man, Matthew subconsciously ignored her. "Miss Anna, do you know where Merlin went?" Matthew asked Anna. Originally, as a court magician, Merlin should have stayed in the Uruk temple to serve King Gilgamesh, but under King Gilgamesh's order, May, as a court magician, and Anna followed Gadotsi and Matthew to the southern jungle. As for why Matthew asked Anna this, it was entirely because Merlin told Anna to remember to protect the two of them during the earthquake and quickly left. I don't know. Probably he went to the epicenter. Hearing Matthew's question, Anna's purple eyes under the cloak looked at the place where the giant pillar of light appeared before, and no one knew what she was thinking. Seeing this, Matthew also looked at the place where the giant pillar of light appeared before. When Merlin left, he did go in that direction. Probably he really went to investigate the situation. Mr. Merlin is really reliable. Matthew thought so. After that, Matthew saw that Anna didn't answer anymore, so he didn't ask anymore. After all, a good relationship has to be done step by step. On the other side, in the place where the giant pillar of light disappeared, Merlin, unlike Castor, walked quickly in the mountains and jumped to a relatively high mountain. Oh, this is really amazing. Fufu heard the sound of someone wanting to kick someone. Not far from Merlin, there was a huge pit that could be called a basin. This huge pit was the trace of the giant pillar of light. Around the huge pit, and even in the center, there was a thick black smoke, but the black smoke was dissipating quickly. If you don't look closely, you won't see it at all. As expected of a Villo, it seems that those magical beasts should have been killed by you. Merlin didn't know who he was talking to, but his tone of praise was a little funny. You mean the kobold? Wu Ming's figure slowly came out of the smoke. Although he came out of the smoke, Wu Ming's clothes didn't have the slightest trace of contamination. Merlin judged that Wu Ming probably wrapped himself with magic to avoid being contaminated by the smoke. But this guy is really strong, worthy of being one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. Merlin, who was looking in the direction of Wu Ming, slightly widened his eyes, because behind Wu Ming, a huge kobold body was following Wu Ming. No, it wasn't following Wu Ming. Instead, it was being dragged by Wu Ming with one hand. Chapter 898. Wu Ming dragged the blackened world of Warcraft Eulidium with one hand. When he walked out of the smoke, Wu Ming threw Eulidium heavily. Thump! There was a loud noise, and dust flew everywhere. With Wu Ming's strength and Eulidium's body weight, a huge crater was created on the ground, as expected of our British silver dragon, Vero. Speaking of which, is he dead? Merlin jumped down from the high ground and walked unhurriedly to the large piece of mixed black flesh. Although I think it should be dead after taking that hit, it's a pity. Wu Ming shook his head. This guy was still alive. It could only be said that it was worthy of being the original demon born from Tiamat. Its body was so strong that it was able to survive such an attack. Wu Ming's attack just now was multiple super-level magic, and this guy was still alive. Even if it was a servant, it would not survive such an attack. unless it had a special skill or a special noble artifact. But those mass-produced Eulidium should be dead. If multiple super-level magic couldn't even kill a mass-produced Eulidium, then it would be too cheap. It's not hard to understand why this guy is still alive. This is the so-called prototype. According to King Gilgamesh and my judgment, they are indeed Tiamat's the 11 sons. Merlin poked Eulidium with his staff and told Wooming his information. I've fought with it before, so I'm pretty sure of this. Then, Wooming walked to Eulidium's head and created a weapon with a high-grade item. He was ready to pierce Eulidium's brain through its eyes and kill it completely. Why did you abandon your mission and come to me? The reason Merlin appeared in this place must be because he had a mission. Otherwise, why would a court magician like him come to this border? While Wooming was talking, Eulidium's body shook a little. It was the desire to live. Wait. If it's not dead, don't kill it. Merlin grabbed Wooming's hand and quickly stopped Wooming's action, saving Eulidium, one of the 11 sons of Tiamat. Eulidium, who was still conscious, heaved a sigh of relief. Thanks to the Mother Goddess, Eulidium could breathe more air between heaven and earth. It felt like he was in the embrace of the Mother Goddess. It's Tiamat's son, and it's an existence that can be communicated with. It's a pity to kill it. In other words, Merlin wanted to take Eulidium as a prisoner to obtain information? Let me say this first. I don't think you can get any useful information. Wooming knew what Merlin wanted to do. It was nothing more than to use an illusion to obtain information. However, Wooming didn't think highly of Merlin, or rather, he didn't think highly of the magical beast. Wooming didn't think that this magical beast had any information in its head. The plan of the magical beast was nothing more than to attack the humans. As the saying goes, counter soldiers with arms, water with an earth weir. Silent Wonder wasn't exaggerating. Since Silent Wonder had returned, he wasn't afraid of not being able to stop the attack of the magical beasts, even if it was a strengthened version of the magical beasts. No, Villo. A lot has happened in the 6 months you left Uruk. The magical beasts have undergone earth-shattering changes, and they have caused a very serious impact on this world. At that moment, Merlin didn't care about Eulidium's presence. He told Wooming some things. Half a year ago, 11 magical beast commanders who called themselves the 11 Sons of Tiamat appeared. In order to eliminate the magical beast commanders, a magical beast commander attacked the Uruk and killed all his servants. The Sage King summoned new servants and established new defense systems in the sky, rivers, lakes, underground, and so on. Although it was just a general description and didn't explain the details, if the audience was Wooming, they would definitely understand. Don't think that it's easy for you to defeat Eulidium. This is a magical beast comparable to a god-level servant. Wooming was also aware of this fact. Previously, Eulidium had used only his body to resist the multiple supreme-level spells he had cast. Although Eulidium was already half-dead, the fact that he could withstand multiple supreme-level spells without dying was enough to prove his strength as a demon commander. Moreover, the servants summoned by King Gilgamesh basically killed a few magical beast commanders at the cost of 2 to 1 or even 3 to 1. That was why Gilgamesh chose to summon new servants. After all, there was a shortage of manpower. It seemed that the Uruk side was able to eliminate the magical beast commander that attacked the Uruk in a suicidal manner. It could be said that they took a big advantage. However, Wooming said this. I really didn't mean to underestimate the magical beast commander. He didn't underestimate the magical beast commander. This made Merlin feel very helpless, so Merlin continued to explain. Since the magical beast commander has good wisdom, then we can't treat the magical beasts as beasts. Merlin's implication was that they must treat the other side as a country where soldiers are magical beasts. Since they could capture one of the generals alive, naturally, they couldn't kill it easily. They had to squeeze out the last bit of value before killing it. If this kobold Eulidium knew about this, he would definitely call Merlin a monster. Anyway, I didn't mean to refute you. You can do whatever you want. Shrugging his shoulders, Wooming walked to the side and removed the weapon in his hand. The weapon turned into blue magic particles and dissipated. Yes, you've helped me a lot. Merlin nodded with a smile, then walked to the front of Eulydium, who had lost the ability to resist. Then, he gently tapped Eulydium's head with his staff. All right, Eulydium of Warcraft, relax. I'll be gentle. I'll take care of you like a dream. Then, Eulydium fell into an illusion that Wuming could not see. After about a minute or two, Merlin dispelled the hallucinating spell, and the last trace of Eulydium's life force dissipated. What did you do to it? Wuming glanced at the lifeless Eulydium, then looked at Merlin strangely. Nothing. Merlin laughed proudly, which made Wuming speechless. It had to be said that in comparison, Merlin was even more ruthless than Wuming. Anyway, I've already obtained information about the magical beasts. Then, Merlin quietly looked at Wuming. How about it, Villo? Do you want to hear it? Wuming snapped his fingers in response to Merlin. Pah! The instant he snapped his fingers, Eulydium's corpse instantly burst into flames. Although Eulydium had said that he wanted to eat Wuming, Wuming was not perverted enough to eat Eulydium. However, the sudden burst of flames gave Merlin a fright. Clearly, this was Wuming's answer to Merlin's question. Okay, calm down, I'll tell you now. As the flames burned, Merlin told him the information he had obtained from Eulydium's mind. Chapter 899. The magical beasts are preparing to attack the north wall and destroy it in one fell swoop. Is that so? Wuming replied to Merlin unhappily. After all, this didn't seem to be any important information. Not only that, the magical beasts are also preparing to launch a fierce feint attack on humans from the mountains in the northeast, the Persian Gulf in the southeast, and the highlands in the southwest. Depending on the conditions, they will turn the feint attack into their main force. If that's the case, we will be in danger. The strengthened magical beasts posed a great threat to humans. If 2 or 3 people could barely deal with an ordinary magical beast in the past, now it would take nearly 10 people to deal with an ordinary magical beast. Moreover, if it weren't for King Gilgamesh calmly issuing new defense regulations and strengthening the defenses of the North Wall and even other areas, the Uruk wouldn't have been able to hold on for more than half a year. But even so, the North Wall could only barely hold on. It wouldn't be surprising if it was broken through at any time. And if the number of magical beasts was large enough to besiege the Uruk from all directions, the humans in Mesopotamia would be completely finished. Merlin told Wuming about this analysis and also some details about the magical beasts, reminding Wuming not to underestimate them. I see. It's already that serious. At this moment, Wuming had a thorough understanding of the current situation. Wuming even wondered if Gydia had made some changes to the last singularity. Then, Wuming realized a problem. Speaking of which, does the commander of the magical beasts want to break the agreement of the 3 goddesses and include the Quetzalcoatl in the attack? Or has the fact that the Quetzalcoatl changed sides been exposed? The mountains in the southwest were adjacent to the forest of the Quetzalcoatl. Even if they went around the edge of the Uruk, they would still be considered to have stepped into the territory of the Quetzalcoatl. However, if they did so, they would be considered to have crossed the border. Therefore, if they wanted to cross the border and attack the Uruk from the southwest, they would have to face the wrath of the Quetzalcoatl. Although the commander of the beasts was at the level of a deity, the Quetzalcoatl was still one of the 3 goddesses in the alliance, an existence equal to Gorgon. Since they were intelligent, they wouldn't do something so ridiculous. Because the goddess of the underworld is unable to leave the underworld, the magical beast commanders haven't had any designs on her for the time being. I don't know whether the feathered god has been exposed or not, but from Eulydium's memories, the feathered god has indeed been included in their list of targets to be destroyed along with the humans. Through Eulydium's memories, Merlin knew that there would be a new magic beast commander coming to support Eulydium, preparing to annihilate the humans along with the feathered god. As for whether or not the feathered god's betrayal of the 3 goddesses' alliance was exposed, Merlin had no way of knowing. If the feathered god has to face more than 3 magical beast commanders, I'm afraid it will be difficult for the feathered god to deal with them. Merlin judged. The Quetzalcoatl that appeared in this world was only a servant. Even if it was a servant at the level of a god, it was still a clone. When facing the 11 sons of Tiamat, it was inevitable that it would not be able to do much. It's better not to underestimate the feathered god. Wu-Ming did not think that the feathered god, as the main deity of South America, would be weak. Although Wu-Ming used Enkidu to capture the feathered god at that time, if the feathered god had refused, the result would have been unpredictable. The most important thing was that the feathered god's heart was with the humans. Wu-Ming only told the feathered god the fact that there is still hope for the humans, so the feathered god finally chose to compromise. King Gilgamesh also has great expectations for the feathered god. After the feathered god defected to our side, Gilgamesh let the feathered god expand the scope of the jungle, including the entire south and southwest into the feathered god's jungle. This is to guard against the magical beasts that try to bypass the north wall from the southwest plateau. Letting the feathered god guard the southwest was part of Gilgamesh's defense plan. However, it's better to be cautious. The servants on the human side dared to gamble, but the humans could not afford to gamble at the moment. If they failed, it was likely that they would lose everything. I'll go back to Uruk first and see the king. The current situation was not something that Wu-Ming and Merlin could decide. They had to discuss it with Gilgamesh. By the way, why did you come to the remote border? Merlin didn't answer this question from the beginning. If it wasn't for the fact that Wu-Ming was going to Uruk to find Gilgamesh, he almost forgot to ask Merlin the purpose of coming here. Haha, actually, I accompanied the people of Chaldea to support the feathered god. When Merlin said that, Wu-Ming's eyes lit up. Sure enough, Tachika and the others have arrived. They just arrived in Uruk not long ago. After being trained by King Gilgamesh, they began to carry out the king's first order. And that order was to support the jungle in the south. Sure enough, the speed of time passing is not the same. Wu-Ming said to himself for a while. The speed of time passing was not the same. Wu-Ming already knew that, so Wu-Ming didn't make a fuss about it. If that's the case, then I won't go to Uruk for now. No matter what, he had to meet Gadatsi and the others first. Gah! At this moment, a small pterosaur descended from the sky and came to Merlin's side. Oh, is this news from King Gilgamesh? Merlin untied the clay tablet fixed on the small pterosaur's back and handed it to Wu-Ming. It must be related to you. You could take a look first. Indeed, as Merlin guessed, the clay tablet said that Merlin and Chaldea were to find Wu-Ming and meet up with him, and they were to follow Wu-Ming's instructions in the following operation. It's just for you to meet up with me. Wu-Ming didn't read it out loud. After reading it, he crushed the clay tablet. Hey, I haven't read it yet. If King Gilgamesh knows about this, he will definitely blame me. Merlin looked like he was going to suffer. Don't I know you? Your skin is thicker than Chaldea. Wu-Ming's implication was that Gilgamesh's scolding would not affect Merlin, and Merlin would still eat and drink as usual. As expected of my best friend, Villo, you really understand me. Ha-ha. Merlin laughed shamelessly. Let's go find Tachika and the others. Ignoring Merlin, Wu-Ming stepped forward and walked in the direction of the jungle. Not good. Merlin's sudden shout made Wu-Ming turn around helplessly. What's wrong? Because I fell behind halfway. I'm not sure where the destination is, sorry. Merlin had an apologetic expression, but no matter how Wu-Ming looked at it, Merlin's face was full of annoyance. If I'm not mistaken, it's Eridu. I've been there before, follow me. Thank you so much, as expected of my best friend. Accompanied by Merlin's strange laughter, the two entered the jungle from the opposite direction. Chapter 900. Oh, so this is Eridu. Sure enough, due to the influence of the jungle, everywhere looks like a primeval forest. Merlin, who had followed Wu-Ming to Eridu, exclaimed in surprise. If it's as you said, then the leopard man has already brought Tachika and the others here. They're most likely here. Wu-Ming walked into Eric Metropolis. The people who were working hard to make a living were shocked when they saw Wu-Ming. It's Hyunryong-sama. Hyunryong-sama? Hyunryong. Sama has come to Eridu, but I heard that Hyunryong, Sama sacrificed himself to fight the demonic beasts. You idiot! Hyunryong, Sama is such a powerful person. How could he sacrifice himself for something like that? I told you that's just a rumor. Hyunryong, Sama is standing right in front of us. Hyunryong Sama. Ignoring some of the comments, the people of Erida knelt down and started praying and cheering for Wuming. Wuming didn't stop the people from praying and cheering. Or rather, he couldn't stop them at all. This was the end of the gods' era, but the end of the gods' era was still in the gods' era. Stopping the people from praying, supporting, and cheering for the gods was the same as killing them. Therefore, Wuming didn't try to stop them. After all, everything had to be done step by step. Even if the gods' era was about to disappear, it was still the same. Wuming nodded at the people who were praying and cheering. He quickly left the place where the people were praying and headed towards the feathered serpent god's temple. You're so popular here, Merlin, who had also caught up with them, said in surprise as he walked beside Wuming. Although Wuming was well-liked in Mesopotamia as a Hyunryong, the humans in Idu treated Wuming a little too well. After all, I was the one who pulled the Quetzalcoatl into the alliance. Only then did the Quetzalcoatl promise not to terrorize Eric Metropolis and UR. They must be very grateful to me for that. Wuming did not think much of it. However, it was precisely because the Quetzalcoatl was no longer terrorizing them that Gilgamesh was relieved to let the Quetzalcoatl manage the southern cities temporarily. Ha! In that case, the feathered serpent god will become your stepping stone. Wuming only smiled at Merlin's debauchery. Be careful. The feathered serpent god might hear you and give you a wrestling combo. At that moment, Merlin put away his smile and became serious, which was rare for him. However, it was not because Merlin was afraid of the feathered serpent god's wrestling combo, but because Gadatsi and the others appeared. Assassin Senior Villo? Gurdatsi and Mashu looked at Wuming in surprise. They fell into a state of shock. Long time no see, Tachika, Matthew. After leaving the residential area of Idu, Wuming, Merlin, Gadatsi, and Matthew went to the special house that the leopard man prepared in advance for Gadatsi and the others near the temple of the feathered serpent god. They sat around a stone square table. Originally, Gadatsi and Matthew were resting here, but the people working near the temple bustled toward the city center, and while running, they said, Hyunryong, Sama, is here. After that, the two, who were not familiar with Hyunryong, learned from Roman that Hyunryong was the most mysterious and powerful god among the Sumer gods. Hyunryong should also be his servant. I detected a very dense mana source here, which is probably emitted by Hyunryong. According to my judgment, Hyunryong is probably one of us. The two, who were a little interested in Hyunryong, and Roman proposed to meet this, one of us, so Gadatsi and Matthew went out of the house to see what Hyunryong looked like. As a result, they didn't see Hyunryong, but they saw an acquaintance. At this moment, Gadatsi, who was in a good mood, took the initiative to ask a question, regardless of whether Hyunryong was Hyunryong or not. Assassin, did you come here to help us? How did you come to this singularity? Matthew was also quite curious about this. The Winterwood singularity aside, the American singularity appeared because of Queen Maeve who held the Holy Grail. And Wuming could appear in the Middle East singularity probably because he should be the same as Bedivere. At this moment, the Villo Senior, who could appear in the Mesopotamia singularity in BC, made Matthew quite curious. It's normal that you don't know. Wuming didn't tell the two about his other identity, and when they met just now, Wuming had left the city center, and there were no citizens praying around him. Gadatsi and Matthew didn't know the identity of Wuming and Hyunryong. Actually, before Wuming could say anything, Merlin rushed to answer. He's a local. It's normal for him to appear here. And Merlin, who rushed to answer, was still playing dumb and keeping them in suspense. Mr. Merlin, what does this mean? Matthew was quite puzzled. Not only Matthew, but Gadatsi was also puzzled. Then, Gadatsi looked at her bracelet. Doctor, do you know what Merlin means? However, Roman, who was in Chaldea, didn't answer. Doctor? Doctor? Mashu also shouted a few words. Is he asleep? Gadotsi guessed. Yes, yes, this is the almighty Leonardo da Vinci. Dr. Roman found it difficult to accept the reality and went to make coffee. Let this genius answer your doubts. Leonardo da Vinci's voice came from the bracelet instead of Roman. According to the test, the magic source that was suspected to be Hyunryong was actually emitted by the Villo. In other words, Dr. Roman's judgment was wrong. Gadotsi and Matthew didn't think there was a problem. However, Wuming, who saw this scene, smiled helplessly. These two little cuties were so natural that they didn't realize the real problem. Merlin, too, burst out laughing at this. What's the problem? Gadotsi was even more puzzled. She felt that what the others were discussing was not the same as what she and Matthew were discussing. In the end, Leonardo da Vinci told Matthew and Gadotsi the correct answer. To Chica, Matthew, it's not that Roman's judgment was wrong. It's because the Villo is Hyunryong. Leonardo da Vinci shut his mouth. Wuming shook his head helplessly, and Merlin also stopped laughing. The whole room was replaced by silence. In other words, the Villo is the mysterious Uruk Hyunryong. Dr. Roman, who came back from making coffee, said in shock, Hey. It could be said that Gadotsi and Matthew finally experienced the feeling when Dr. Roman's mentality exploded. It was worth celebrating. Chapter 901. I'm sorry. I'm really a Uruk Hyunryong. I'm really sorry that I didn't tell you before, Wuming said apologetically. However, Wuming couldn't be blamed. It wasn't something worth bragging about. After interacting with Gadotsi and the rest for a while, Wuming had subconsciously forgotten that they didn't know about his other identities. Wuming had fully proved this point in the American and Middle Eastern singularities. Hyunryong is the most mysterious existence in the Sumer pantheon. He is so mysterious that his real name hasn't been passed down. Only Hyunryong, which is similar to a title, exists. This has led to a lot of rumors about Hyunryong's real name. There are even rumors that Hyunryong is the son of Tiamat, Ramu. Roman, who had returned to his seat, began to explain to everyone the information about Hyunryong recorded in Chaldea. Personally, I don't agree that Hyunryong is the magical beast Rama born by Tiamat, but I'm more inclined to believe that Hyunryong is the son of Tiamat. Roman's voice kept coming from Gadotsi's bracelet. Gadotsi, Matthew, and even Merlin, as well as a petite girl whose face was covered by a hood, all listened silently, as if they were listening to a story. According to the records of mythology, Hyunryong was once feared and respected by powerful gods such as Godin, wind god Enlil, and water god Enki. Because Hyunryong's shrine was located in Uruk, even the position of the Uruk city god was occupied by Hyunryong during the late period of the god's era. Wuming, who was listening by the side, had a strange and awkward feeling. Moreover, these sayings were definitely made up by later generations. He had clearly left before Gilgamesh found the elixir of immortality, and he had no intention of competing with Ishtar for the position of the Uruk city god. Many people think that Hyunryong was treated so politely by the gods because of his noble birth. Only the son of Tiamat could be respected by Godin. In addition, Hyunryong did not pass down his real name. Therefore, some people think that Hyunryong's true form should be Tiamat's son, Ramu. But, Doctor, I remember that there are two Ramu, right? Matthew had doubts about this. Indeed, as Matthew said, there are two existences named Ramu in Mesopotamia. One is Ramu, who is also the son of Tiamat, and gave birth to god En and wind god Enlil. The other is Ramu, one of the 11 magical beasts that Tiamat gave birth to. However, these are just rumors, and the credibility is not high. Looking at Gadotsi and Matthew nodding like students in class, Wuming felt more than a little embarrassed. Not only were they rumors, but they were also completely fabricated by the later generations. Wuming did not interrupt Roman's scientific explanation. He just kept complaining in his heart. Although it is unknown when Hyunryong appeared in the eyes of the people, the period when Hyunryong faded from the eyes of the people was the period when King Gilgamesh was in power. That was the period when the gods gradually disappeared and the era of the gods gradually declined. According to the records, Hyunryong personally destroyed his own temple, hoping that humans would walk the path of breaking away from the gods. Although there were gods who agreed to the separation of humans and gods, their intentions were not strong. Hyunryong could be said to be the only god who took the initiative to strongly advocate for the separation of humans and gods. Wuming nodded silently. Although there was some content in this statement that was fabricated by the later generations, it was generally not much different from Wuming's thoughts. Wuming, who was an outsider, was included in the Sumer divine system. But even so, he was still not a god of Mesopotamia. Wuming, who had strong modern thinking, naturally advocated the separation of humans and gods. Therefore, although Hyunryong was revered by the other gods, there were not many who interacted with him. Hyunryong spent more time with humans, especially the hero King Gilgamesh. It was said that Gilgamesh was taken care of by Hyunryong when he was young. The relationship between the two could be said that Hyunryong was Gilgamesh's adoptive father. Wuming took care of the female Gilgamesh in the parallel world. Although that was the case after the adjustment of the suppression force, as long as it was a world with the shape of the moon, regardless of whether it was a parallel world or not, there would be myths related to Hyunryong in Mesopotamia. Logically speaking, before Wuming came to this singularity, he had no contact with this male Gilgamesh. But whenever Wuming communicated with him, he felt a sense of familiarity, as if he had really taken care of this singularity before. Senior Villo is actually King Gilgamesh's adoptive father? Matthew, who understood this, was quite surprised. As for why he was surprised, he was naturally surprised by the sense of strangeness in it. The great silver dragon of Britain, the first knight of the Round Table, was actually the adoptive father of the most ancient hero King Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia. How could it not be strange? Roman also sighed helplessly. The legend of Villo Saransword, a knight of the Round Table, is that of a dragon who transformed into a human. Now it seems that this is not a legend, but a fact. Probably Hyunryong went to ancient Britain after leaving Mesopotamia. This was the only explanation at present. Why don't we ask Assassin? Isn't he right in front of us? Gadotsi looked curiously at Wuming, who was sitting in the most inconspicuous position. Since the person involved was present, why not just ask him? Matthew and Roman, who was now in Chaldea, were both stunned. Because of Wuming's silence at the beginning, coupled with Roman's extensive scientific knowledge, Matthew and Roman had subconsciously forgotten that the person involved was present at the scene. It seems that is indeed the case. Matthew smiled awkwardly. Yes, why didn't I think of it? Damn it. Roman's deafening voice made Gadotsi subconsciously move her arm away. Great, it's good that the person involved is present. I really don't understand why the Uruk Hyunryong is a knight of the Round Table Villo. Sumer turned out to be a knight of the Round Table. This is so strange. Is it really okay for you to be so agitated? Wuming silently complained. You'll die of overwork if you're too conflicted, Roman. Wuming even heard Leonardo da Vinci's nonsensical teasing. How can it be so easy to die of overwork? If it was so easy, I don't know how many times I would have died of overwork. Ignoring the mutual teasing of the Chaldea duo, Matthew looked at Wuming with great seriousness. Senior Villo, what is the truth? Matthew's small eyes sparkled with interest. Ahem. Matthew, you have to know that the reason why mystery is because of its uncertainty and, most importantly, confidentiality. Chapter 902. Wuming coughed and pretended to be serious, which made Matthew sit up straight. Yes, I'm sorry, Villo Senpai, I've offended you. After all, the world of magic was all about concealment and mystery. It was likely that if the truth was exposed, it would have a certain impact on the Villo Senpai. Matthew thoughtfully made up an excuse for Wuming. Only Merlin looked like he wanted to laugh, but didn't dare. It seemed that Merlin knew everything. Wuming looked at Merlin as if he was looking at a dead man, as if to say, If you dare to laugh or expose my information, I'll kill you. Anyway, let's talk about my problem later. Speaking of which, where did the feathered serpent god go? And where's the leopard man who brought you here? I don't see him either. We haven't seen the feathered serpent god. Maybe he's not here. As for Miss Leopard Man, Matthew looked cautious, so he was definitely not sure. After the leopard rested for a while, he roared and ran into the forest. The one who spoke was Miss Anna, whose face couldn't be seen clearly. "Ah, Miss Anna, I'm sorry, I didn't notice you coming." Matthew was startled by Anna's voice, and he apologized guiltily. "It's okay." It seemed that Anna didn't mind it very much. "Assassin, let me introduce you. This is Anna, the Anna we met in Winterwood City, but she doesn't remember us. When we met Merlin, Anna was with Merlin." "Yo, Anna, long time no see." Wu Ming greeted her as if they were old friends. Anna nodded silently to the powerful existence who had protected her master, Sakura Madu. Is this singularity Anna, the one in Winterwood? It seemed that Gadatsi had thought of Anna as the Anna in Winterwood City from the very beginning. Of course it's Anna. It's not difficult to understand why Anna can appear in this singularity. Firstly, the goddess of magical beasts of the Three Goddesses Alliance was Gorgon, who wielded Tiamat's authority. Secondly, the master of Anna in the Winterwood singularity, Sakura Madu, was sealed in the Holy Grail that Wu Ming had given to the fake Enkidu. It's not impossible for Anna's master to appear in this world. However, this was difficult for Gadatsi and Matthew to comprehend. After all, they did not have enough information. But Miss Anna acted as if she didn't know us at all. "She didn't talk to us at all," Matthew said weakly. "I just hate humans." "I didn't mean to avoid talking to you," Anna suddenly interrupted, although her explanation was full of contradictions. "By the way, you should know Anna's real name, right?" Gadatsi and Matthew exchanged glances and nodded. As expected, Miss Anna is Medusa. Back in Winterwood City, Gadatsi and the others did not interact much with Anna, so they did not get a real name from Anna. However, based on their encounter with Stheno and Urieli in Winterwood City, as well as the way the twin goddesses addressed and treated Anna, Roman guessed Anna's real name through future analysis. At this moment, Anna, who was called by her real name, did not show any emotion. It was as if she was not interested in anything. "Do you know that the goddess of magical beasts is Gorgon, who wields Tiamat's authority?" "Huh." Matthew's exclamation told Wu Ming that she was indeed unaware of this. "Indeed. Although we have some information, it's only a little. Part of the information about the goddess of magical beasts was heard from the civilians," Gadatsi added. Although many people knew that the goddess of magical beasts was Gorgon, the civilians did not have a deep understanding of it. Whether it was Tiamat or the outer gods who wielded Tiamat's authority, as long as it was a goddess who could produce magical beasts, it was Tiamat to them. At most, it was Tiamat who changed her appearance. In short, it was true that the magical beasts that attacked them were produced by the mother goddess. "It seems that Merlin hasn't told you yet." With a sigh, Wu Ming looked at Merlin. Gadatsi and the others were unlikely to get information from Gilgamesh. After all, he was the most ancient hero king who approached Gadatsi and the others as soon as he came up and immediately arranged for them to undergo training in the Uruk after confirming that they were unqualified. However, if it was Merlin, he should have known about this piece of information. Because King Gilgamesh told me not to disclose any information to Chaldea and the others who were training in the Uruk, I completely forgot about it over time." Merlin laughed and scratched the back of his head proudly. "In short, let's analyze the current situation now." The scientific meeting immediately turned into an intelligence meeting, and Roman also abdicated his position and stopped talking. The Three Goddesses Alliance is the goddess of the underworld in Mesopotamia, the Quetzalcoatl in Central and South America, and the Greek goddess of monsters Gorgon, who holds Tiamat's authority. Gadatsi and Mashu nodded. They were not surprised. It seemed that this was part of the information they had. The Quetzalcoatl was betrayed by me, and the goddess of the underworld can't leave the ground. The biggest threat is the goddess of monsters, Gorgon, who holds Tiamat's authority. In the face of this biggest threat, my last spiritual base attempted to perish together with Gorgon's spiritual base, but unfortunately, the fake Enkidu came and stopped it. However, Wuming was more concerned about the fact that Gorgon, who was seriously injured at that time, recovered slowly and effectively. Was it the influence of Tiamat's authority, or something else? While Wuming paused to think, Matthew raised a small hand and began to ask questions. That, Senior Villo, what do you mean by the spiritual base last time? After all, I'm Hyunryong from Mesopotamia. When a singularity appeared in Mesopotamia, I naturally came back to take a look. By the way, I appeared in Uruk one step earlier than Merlin. Yes, but it's a pity that Hyunryong, who appeared in Uruk one step earlier than me, left early last time, and he didn't even manage to perish together with me. What a pity. In response to Merlin's whispering, Wuming responded with a murderous glare. However, in Matthew's view, this scene was indeed a quarrel between friends. By the way, it's a great fate that Mr. Merlin and Senior Villo can meet in Uruk. The two of them were both subjects of King Arthur in Britain, and now they met in Uruk as subjects of King Gilgamesh. It was indeed a great fate. But in the end, whether it's in Britain or in Mesopotamia, I'm a level higher than Merlin. Wuming smiled proudly at Merlin. Thinking about it carefully, that's true. Gadotsi thought for a moment and nodded. In Britain, although Wuming and Merlin were both subjects of King Arthur, as the closest subjects of King Arthur, their status was not lower than Merlin's, and even higher. The difference was even greater in Uruk. Previously, Dr. Roman said that Hyunryong in Uruk is equivalent to King Gilgamesh's adoptive father, while Merlin was only King Gilgamesh's court magician. Although it wasn't a crushing victory, no matter how you looked at it, Wuming was superior to Merlin. Ha ha ha, you're still so merciless, my dear friend. Chapter 903. I think you've forgotten the pain after the scar has healed. In the past, Merlin had been taught a lesson by Wuming several times because of his excessive teasing. Perhaps it was a symbolic lesson that caused Merlin to become even worse. However, Wuming was too lazy to refute Merlin. It is said that the Knight of the Round Table Villo and the great wizard Merlin are close friends. It seems that it is true. Regarding friends, Wuming had to admit that Merlin was possibly, a friend of his for the time being. Wuming knew Merlin during the period of King UCI. He also participated in the plan to create the Red Dragon bloodline. Although Merlin was sometimes disdainful, Wuming and Merlin had indeed become friends. That's right, Villo and I. No, I have to say Hyunryong now. Lord Hyunryong and I are indeed good friends. Ha ha, sure enough, if you give Merlin some face, he would be able to open a dye house. It's just Merlin. Breathe with gills in the future. Wuming directly gave Merlin a dead fish's eye. What the hell do you mean by breathing with gills? And my name is Merlin. Merlin, not Merman. Merlin waved his staff to express his dissatisfaction, but Wuming turned a blind eye. Sure enough, you two have a good relationship, just like Matthew and me. Seeing this scene, Gadotsi smiled and immediately hugged Matthew. Say, Senior, please don't be like this. Miss Anna, who was alone, couldn't help but make a sound. Oh, even I want to have a good chat with my best friend. Roman from Chaldea also made a sound of dissatisfaction. Oh, if I remember correctly, Romani is someone who doesn't have that kind of beautiful existence. Damn it, Leonardo da Vinci, don't expose me. It was about time for the farce to end. At this moment, Wuming coughed. Let's talk about my best friend later. Let's continue our conversation. Wuming knocked on the table, and a 3D map projection appeared in front of everyone. This was a map made by Wuming using magic. The mountains, plains, hills, and so on were clearly visible on the map. Even the Uruk and other cities were depicted very realistically, like a high-quality model. Oh, that's amazing. Gadotsi's clear eyes reflected the projected map, and she exclaimed in surprise. The Quetzalcoatl is on our side, and the goddess of the underworld can't leave the underworld, so we don't have to worry about it for now. The original goddess of magical beasts was also severely injured when I left last time. It stands to reason that the situation at this moment shouldn't be so serious. Then, Merlin continued Wu Ming's words. Hyunryong's departure last time caused heavy damage to Gorgon, and countless magical beasts were also affected by the aftermath of the battle between Hyunryong and Gorgon. But 3 months ago, for some reason, a large number of strengthened magical beasts poured out of the fir forest. Not only did their physical fitness and size increase, but there were also new types of magical beasts. A large number of new magical beasts and strengthened magical beasts attacked the north wall and caused heavy damage to the north wall. Merlin recalled the reports from the front line and narrated little by little. These words were not only for Gadatsi, but also for Wu Ming, who didn't know about these things. Then, 11 magical beast commanders who claimed to be the sons of Tiamat appeared on the magical beast front. That night, Mushiu Huxiu led a large number of mass-produced magical beasts to raid the Uruk from the underground. Our side suffered heavy losses, and nearly 1/3 of the total population of the Uruk were killed. In the end, one of the magical beast commanders, Mushiu Huxiu, was killed at the cost of sacrificing a servant. Many mass-produced magical beasts were beheaded. Gadatsi and Matthew's expressions were slightly hazy after Merlin's words. All of this was seen by Wu Ming's eyes. Perhaps Gadatsi and Matthew had learned from the Uruk survivors about the Uruk disaster 3 months ago. There should be many relatives of the victims among them. Gadatsi and Matthew were extremely emotional. Perhaps both of them didn't feel good when they communicated with the relatives of the victims. Sure enough, even after experiencing 6 singularities, the ordinary human Gadatsi and the pure Matthew still couldn't get used to sacrifice. Wu Ming walked behind Gadatsi and Matthew, then stretched out his hand and rubbed their little heads. Don't worry, I wasn't there back then. Now that I'm back in Uruk, I won't allow anyone to sacrifice themselves. This is the promise that Winter Wood's assassin made to you, and it's also the agreement that the Knight of the Round Table Villa made with you. At the same time, this is also my promise to the people in the land of Mesopotamia who pray to the gods and believe in Hyunryong as a Uruk. Gadatsi and Matthew were still in a daze at this moment, as if they couldn't react to Wu Ming's words. But it had to be said that Wu Ming's words did play a big role in comforting the two. At the very least, their expressions were no longer hazy, and they were full of energy again. Yeah, assassin, I'll remember. Yes, Senior Villo, it's a promise. On the side, Anna, who saw this scene, was thinking about something, and at the same time, it attracted Wu Ming's attention. Anna, since I brought Sakura here, then I will be responsible for taking Sakura back. This is also my agreement with you. As you wish. However, the action of tightening the hood again to cover her face showed that Anna's heart was also fluctuating at this moment. Gadatsi and Matthew were confused by the conversation between Wu Ming and Anna. However, before Wu Ming could explain, Merlin, who breathed through his gills, broke the beautiful atmosphere. Okay, can you let me continue? Everyone looked at Merlin with murderous eyes. Not only that, but Chaldea's Roman also scolded him. Merlin, you bastard, you really don't know how to read the atmosphere. You're as bad as the records say, damn it. Roman, who had been monitoring the situation in Chaldea's control room, was originally relieved. After all, Gadatsi's happy mood was still helpful for Gadatsi's safety. After all, there was a risk when humans performed race shift, and they might completely disappear into the past. Along the way from the 6 singularities, Roman had been using equipment to monitor Gadatsi's physical condition. It turned out that a happy mood was beneficial for Gadatsi's safety. However, Gadatsi and Matthew understood Merlin very well. Forget it, Doctor. After all, Mr. Merlin is right. It was originally a meeting to share information. Even if Merlin didn't understand the atmosphere and interrupted, it was reasonable to say that there was nothing wrong. Moreover, there was a reason why Merlin had interjected, because the next topic will be even crueler, so be mentally prepared in advance. Chapter 904. King Gilgamesh, who was deeply aware of the seriousness of the demonic beast commander, resummoned 7 servants and made a plan with the newly summoned servants to attract and disperse the enemy. Together with the remaining servants of the previous summons, a total of 10 servants were dispatched to launch a decapitation operation on the demonic beast commander. 10 servants. Matthew and Gadotsi were really shocked. After all, the number of servants was indeed too many. Although Gadotsi and Mashu did encounter a lot of servants in the first few singularities, those servants were either alone or in small groups. At most, Gadotsi could gather a lot of servants around himself with his master's identity. But in this singularity, King Gilgamesh, as a human in the singularity, had 10 servants under his command. How could this not be shocking? So that's why King Gilgamesh is sitting in Uruk as a magician. Roman from Chaldea also made a reasonable judgment on the posture of the sage king. It was because of the need to command the people that the hero king became the sage king. It was because of the need to summon servants to resist the demonic beasts that Gilgamesh changed from a warrior to a magician. So, the supply of magic for so many servants is supported by King Gilgamesh alone. Matthew's question made Gadotsi aware of the problem. After the growth of 6 singularities, Gadotsi also had a lot of understanding of the servant's contract and the supply of magic. Gadotsi was able to form a contract with many servants because of the magic support behind Chaldea. If it was really relying on Gadotsi to provide magic alone, as an ordinary human, she was afraid that she could not even support Matthew to fight. However, this was not Chaldea, but Mesopotamia in BC, and Gilgamesh did not have the magic support behind Chaldea like Gadotsi. In that case, the magic needed to form a contract with so many servants was all provided by Gilgamesh alone. Indeed, assuming that the servants rely on food to replenish their magic, and Gil only provides the magic to maintain the contract, that is quite a large amount of magic power. When Gilgamesh was suggested by Wooming to summon servants, he proposed that the magic source should be solved by Wooming, because Wooming was worried that providing a large amount of magic to the servants would overwhelm Gilgamesh. However, Wooming's proposal was rejected by Gilgamesh, coupled with the fact that Gilgamesh summoned new servants. The burden on him was not something that ordinary people could bear. King Gilgamesh is so great. I thought he was just a bad-tempered tyrant. Gadotsi scratched the back of her head embarrassedly. Ha ha ha, if King Gilgamesh heard it, I'm afraid he would praise you for your honesty. After all, the gift that King Gilgamesh gave you is really rough. At that time, the trial that King Gilgamesh gave to Gadotsi really scared her. At that time, Gadotsi's face changed color. It was no wonder that Gadotsi had a bad impression of King Gilgamesh. No one would have a good impression of a guy who almost killed them when they first met, and Gadotsi was the same. However, listening to Merlin's words, Gadotsi's view of Gilgamesh has greatly changed. Gil won't care about your opinion of him, especially the current Sage King. Don't think too much about it. Wooming rubbed Gadotsi's head and comforted her. I know. Gadotsi's cheeks were slightly red. Even after experiencing 6 singularities, Gadotsi was still an immature and cute little girl. Then, Wooming looked at Merlin and restarted the topic. If I didn't guess wrong, the result should not be ideal. That's right. We sacrificed 8 servants to kill 3 demonic beast commanders. Sacrificed 8 servants. Matthew's eyes widened. Only 3 demonic beast commanders. Gadotsi couldn't help but stand up and hit Wooming behind her. This result is too unsatisfactory. Chaldea's Roman couldn't help but make a helpless sound. Even Leonardo da Vinci, who was always smiling, couldn't smile at this moment. In addition to Merlin and Wooming, who proposed that the result was not ideal, only Anna didn't have any emotional or physical fluctuations, but Anna's heart was probably not calm at this moment. Including the one that was sacrificed in the Uruk, the result was that a total of 9 servants were sacrificed, but only 4 demonic beast commanders were killed, and there were still 6 demonic beast commanders alive. Even so, there should be more than 2 servants in the Uruk. Wooming asked again. Gadotsi and Matthew were stunned again. The result is so miserable because Merlin deliberately said that to let you hear it. As Merlin said before, the next topic will be more cruel. In short, Merlin did it deliberately. As Wu Ming spoke, he glanced at Merlin, who was wearing a mischievous smile. And there's one thing I'm sure of. Merlin definitely won't participate in the decapitation operation, so he won't be one of the surviving servants. In that case, the number of servants left in Uruk must be more than 2 mounts. And since there were more than 2 servants left, how could there be only 3 servants left? There must be more than that. Aha, well said, you are indeed my best friend. At this moment, there are still 10 servants left on the human side. There are still 10 servants left? This number is very optimistic for the current situation. This time, it was Roman's voice. Roman is right. After all, there are only 7 servants in the ordinary Holy Grail War. Wu Ming said in agreement. Then, Wu Ming looked at Merlin again. But you should have counted me, Merlin. Of course, after all, you are indeed a servant on our side, aren't you? Sure enough, Merlin was still the strongest when it came to trickery. Matthew and Gadotsi looked at each other. If that was the case, it was really bad. Perhaps Matthew, Anna, and even the leopard man were also included. But it seemed that Merlin was right. In short, let's talk about the remaining servants in addition to the few of you here. As the saying goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. First of all, one must be know yourself. In addition to you, me, Matthew, and Anna, there are Quetzalcoatl, Leopard Man, Leonidas I, who is in charge of defense in the North Wall, Noakamaru and Yuzusobo Benkei, who were in the Uruk under the command of King Gilgamesh, and the last one, Zhuge Kongming. Zhuge Kongming. Chapter 905. Mr. Merlin, are you talking about Zhuge Kongming? Is it the military advisor from ancient China? Gadotsi and Matthew asked Merlin. Yes, it is the military advisor of the Shu Kingdom in ancient China, Zhuge Kongming. And the defense plan for the Uruk and the surrounding areas that were not invaded by the demonic beast was discussed by King Gilgamesh and Zhuge Kongming. After thinking about it carefully, it was indeed a reasonable explanation. After all, if it was really all up to King Gilgamesh, and he had to think about so many problems, he might really die from overwork. I heard that the military advisor had been guarding the Shu Kingdom until his death, not letting it be annexed by the powerful Wei Kingdom. It seems that Mr. Kongming is quite good at defense. In Matthew's view, being able to resist the demonic beasts in a situation where the human forces were so weak, and the people in the Mesopotamia could survive and even live in peace and contentment, not only highlighted the military advisor's resourcefulness, but also reflected the military advisor's achievements in guarding the Shu Kingdom until his death. Having said that, don't forget about the king of the Uruk who wanted to carry the world on his back, Matthew. Maybe Zhuge Kongming did play a big role, but Gilgamesh's role was certainly not less than Zhuge Kongming's. Villo Sr. is right. To be able to summon so many servants to resist the demonic beasts and establish the North Wall, King Gilgamesh is indeed not as good as Zhuge Kongming. It was not an exaggeration. In Wu Ming's view, even without Zhuge Kongming, Gilgamesh could still resist the attack of the demonic beasts and still ensure that the people under his rule could live in peace and contentment. But the price may be accelerated to death from overwork. By the way, we also met Zhuge Kongming when we were in the winter with Singularity. Do you remember Assassin? I don't know if it's the same person. Gadotsi thought of the Zhuge Kongming who used the modern magician's body in the winter with Singularity. Maybe it's the real Zhuge Kongming, Sr. Matthew also discussed with Gadotsi. However, whether it was the pseudo-servant Zhuge Kongming or the real servant Zhuge Kongming, they were the same person, just different in appearance. Mr. Merlin, what kind of person is Zhuge Kongming? Matthew turned to look at Merlin. As the court magician of King Gilgamesh, Merlin should know the situation of Zhuge Kongming. Unfortunately, I only know that Zhuge Kongming is a person wearing a China-style robe. Because I was often asked to run errands by King Gilgamesh, I didn't have much contact with Zhuge Kongming. To put it simply, Merlin didn't know who was in Castor's team. So, Matthew nodded, indicating that he understood. Since it's a China-style robe, it's probably the real Zhuge Kong Ming. Gadotsi judged. Maybe there will be a situation like Matthew. Wu Ming interjected. Last time, Zhuge Kong Ming hid Emilo2's consciousness and used Emilo2's body, clothes, and habits. However, a pseudo-servant could also let the original personality of the body dominate the body. Although Matthew was not a pseudo-servant, Matthew's identity was a subservient, which had the same effect as a pseudo-servant. When Matthew used the power of Galahad, the clothes on his body would turn into purple armor. Therefore, it was also possible that Emilo2 would wear Zhuge Kong Ming's clothes. Then, Wu Ming thought of the leopard man. By the way, the leopard man here may be the same, but the situation may be completely opposite. Wu Ming didn't realize it before, but thinking about it carefully, Wu Ming did see that face in Ilya's world. Miss Leopard Man is also a pseudo-servant. Villo Sr. means that Miss Leopard Man is a god on the inside, and the appearance is a human on the outside. Although they were shocked, Matthew and Gadotsi recalled the Leopard Man's doll-like appearance, and they couldn't help but believe Wu Ming's words. Although Dr. Roman did prove that the Leopard Man was a divine servant, no matter how he looked at it, it was impossible for there to be a god with such a funny appearance. Sure enough, it was caused by a spirit base similar to a pseudo-servant. But the Leopard Man situation is not enough to reach the point of pseudo-servant. The Leopard Man's bestiality is too serious, and there is almost no humanity. At most, it can only be a slight pseudo-servant. Okay, although I don't want to interrupt you. First of all, you have to know that I don't have the slightest combat power. How come? Merlin's words made Gadotsi and Matthew show surprised and disappointed expressions. Zhuge Kong Ming's horror is not his combat power, but his wisdom. As for Merlin, Wu Ming looked at Merlin, who looked at him with expectation and trust. Even Merlin wouldn't make such a joke at this moment. Merlin probably has his own reasons. Merlin doesn't count as combat power. Although Mafia Merlin had been ridiculed by Mafia Merlin, he was still very happy. Regarding the current situation, Gadotsi and Mashu whispered to each other. I feel that Mr. Merlin is so pitiful. It turns out that Mashu also thinks so. At this moment, the current meeting was almost over, and Wu Ming also spoke at the last moment. In short, since the military advisor is in the Uruk, no matter how bad the situation is, the Uruk will probably be fine, Wu Ming said with a kind smile. Looking at Wu Ming's kind smile, Gadotsi, Matthew, and even Anna felt a chill down their spines. In other words, we can be bolder. When Wu Ming said this, Gadotsi and the others felt even more chills down their spines. So, Lord Henryong, what new plan do you have? Merlin also looked at Wu Ming with a smile, but at this moment, Merlin's smile was more and more similar to Wu Ming's in the eyes of Gadotsi and the others. It wasn't unreasonable for these two guys to be best friends. This was the so-called birds of a feather flock together. Let's go and conquer the useless Venus goddess. Chapter 906. Northwest of Mesopotamia, at the foot of Mount Abif, where the mountain range stretched out continuously. Black and purple ripples suddenly appeared here. Then, like carps jumping out of the water, one figure after another jumped out of the black and purple ripples and stood firmly on the ground. There was a black-haired, red-eyed youth wearing the common male clothing of this era, a white-haired nightmare holding a wooden staff, an orange-haired girl with a single ponytail wearing a special magic dress, and a cute girl wearing a slightly revealing purple armor with one of her eyes covered by a fringe. The newcomers were Wu Ming, Merlin, and the slightly reluctant Gadotsi and Matthew. The four of them all arrived at the foot of Mount Abif. Is it really okay for us to leave Miss Anna there like this? Matthew, who had his feet on the ground, was the first to speak uneasily and slightly embarrassed. It's okay, Matthew. This is also Anna's idea. Wu Ming was right. This was indeed Anna's idea. Previously, When Wu Ming was prepared to bring Gadotsi and the others to cause trouble, to attack the Venus goddess, Anna expressed that she was not interested in it. She would rather stay and help clear out the monsters in the surrounding area. After all, Wu Ming was not an unreasonable person. Since Anna had volunteered to stay, Wu Ming did not ask the others and agreed like a dictator. Don't forget that we received King Gilgamesh's order to support the feathered serpent god. Leaving one of us there means that we have indeed played a role and completed the mission. Also, we can inform the feathered serpent god and the leopard man that we have temporarily left. Moreover, Anna was the one who suggested it. This is killing 3 birds with 1 stone, Merlin explained. But, if we do this half-heartedly, is it really okay for us to complete King Gilgamesh's mission? Will it ruin King Gilgamesh's plan? Not only was Matthew worried about this, but so was Gadotsi. Matthew's right. Sigh, I don't want to be given another trial by King Gilgamesh when I go back. Gadotsi said as her face turned pale, as if she was recalling the life and death trial. Facts had proven that even if one's perception of a person changed, the fear of that person would not disappear in a short time. Don't worry. If anything happens, I'll take care of it. Wu Ming walked to the 2 of them and patted their heads. His tone was rather confident. Anyway, Gilgamesh had asked the pterosaur to send over the clay tablet that Gadotsi and the others had to listen to his commands after meeting him. Wasn't it Wu Ming's order to capture the Venus goddess? Gadotsi and the others were indeed listening to Wu Ming's order, so Gilgamesh wouldn't blame Gadotsi and the others. Everything will be taken care of by Wu Ming. Senior Villo, I think we should be more cautious. After all, there are still 6 commanders among the demonic beasts. I'm a little worried about Anna alone. Worried that Anna will be in danger alone? Wu Ming guessed and continued Matthew's words. Matthew nodded. After all, the demonic beast commander is an existence that requires multiple servants to defeat, and it's a way to perish together. Gadotsi also said it was normal for Gadotsi and Matthew to be worried. The data was clearly there. Seeing this, Merlin had to stand up and boost their morale. Don't worry, Matthew. Tachika, the reason why there's a data of multiple servants perishing together to kill the demonic beast commander is entirely because of the situation. This was because of Wu Ming's attention. After all, Wu Ming wasn't very clear about the specific content of it. What do you mean by this? At that moment, they didn't move toward the Abiv mountain, but they found a place to sit and sat down. One of the demonic beast commanders, Mu Hushio, appeared from a Uruk underground and attacked the Uruk. He didn't cause much damage to the Uruk, and he was completely killed by his own pride. After all, Gilgamesh was in charge of the Uruk, and there were many servants. A single demonic beast commander couldn't set off a storm in the Uruk at that time. At the same time, when Merlin paused, Matthew, who was like a student listening to a lecture, raised his hand. But, Mr. Merlin, you said that at that time, a servant was sacrificed to kill the demonic beast commander, and nearly 1/3 of the population in the Uruk city was killed. However, Merlin shook his head. The so-called sacrificed servant was Okita Soki, who was a saber. Okita Soki was seriously injured after the war, but he didn't die. He would recover completely after a few days of rest. However, Okita Soki's skill, Frail, was activated at that time. At this point, Merlin paused and did not continue. However, even if Merlin had said this, everyone more or less understood. Don't tell me. Matthew looked inconceivable. Don't tell me. Gadotsi's whole face was filled with an inconceivable expression. It can't be right. Wu Ming remembered that when Okita Soki was first summoned, he did spit out blood. And from the name of the skill, Frail, it could be said that the effect of the skill was obvious. Yes, because of the activation of Frail, although the injury was serious but not fatal, it directly became a fatal injury. The most fatal injury to a servant was the broken spirit core, and that was the end of the servant's life. Roman, who was in the Chaldea control room, was stunned. He even stopped recording what happened in the singularity. It was completely unimaginable that there would be a servant who was forced to leave because of a skill. As a genius, this is the first time I've heard of such a situation. However, if it's the Okita Soki who is tortured by illness, it's indeed possible. Da Vinci calmly analyzed the situation. The skill frail can turn a serious injury into a fatal injury. It seems that the level of the skill is not low. It should be above B class. Maybe it has reached A class. Moreover, perhaps Saber's luck value is not high. Listening to Leonardo da Vinci's voice through Gadotzi's wrist, Wuming silently complained in his heart. Only a low luck value could explain this. Otherwise, how could Miss Okita encounter such an incredible thing? Chapter 907. Puffed. Cough cough. In short, all of these are coincidences within coincidences, the result of coincidences within coincidences. Merlin, who could not hold back his laughter, immediately covered up for himself. Gadotzi and the others did not pay attention to Merlin's fleeting laughter. They were still puzzled by the fact that a servant would die under their own skills. Although, according to what Merlin said, it is indeed similar to mutual destruction, but you actually deliberately exaggerated it. This once again confirmed Merlin's previous words. The next topic will be more cruel, so be prepared in advance. In short, it was still Merlin's bad taste. Wuming shook his head and stopped thinking about these things. The reason why a servant and Mushio and Hushio mutual destruction was figured out, then the next thing was, so why did 8 of the 10 servants who carried out the decapitation operation and only 2 of them came back? That was the main point. The decapitation operation carried out by the 10 servants could be said to be very successful, and it was not as bad as you think. For the result of the decapitation operation, Merlin thought that it was already very good. Although because of the plan of King Gilgamesh and Zhuge Kong Ming, the demonic beast commanders were temporarily separated, but even if there is only one demonic beast commander, there are demonic beasts everywhere around it. And to complete the decapitation operation meant that they must go deep into the demonic beast group, and because of King Gilgamesh's magical burden, the servants he summoned were not first-class servants, and it was impossible for them to besiege one demonic beast commander with 10 servants. Not to mention that the efficiency was not high, and it was bound to alert the other demonic beast commanders. In case the other demonic beast commanders noticed the problem and gathered together, then they really couldn't do anything. It is basically impossible to get close to the demonic beast commander when the 10 servants are separated. It is basically impossible to kill the commander and retreat while surrounded by so many demonic beasts. Even if it was second-rate or third-rate servants, if 2 or 3 servants fought together, it was still possible to kill a demonic beast commander. The fact also proved that this idea was indeed feasible. 8 servants in exchange for the death of 3 demonic beast commanders. And to put it bluntly, demonic beast commanders seemed to be unable to be mass-produced, and King Gilgamesh could summon servants again as long as he could hold on, although he probably won't do that again. In the end, there were 2 servants that returned to Uruk alive. For a one-way decapitation mission, it was a pleasant surprise that a servant could come back alive. After sacrificing the lives of 3 demon commanders, 2 followers came back alive. Based on this operation decapitation alone, it's already an excellent result. Merlin was very optimistic about this. How could this be? Matthew was shocked. Isn't this a suicide squad? Gadotzi vividly interpreted the essence of the beheading operation. Indeed, King Gilgamesh didn't expect the 10 servants to come back alive. King Gilgamesh assigned this task with the consent of the servants, and they were also very willing to serve as a suicide squad in order to give hope and a future for mankind. Merlin said the truth indifferently. This is too cruel. Matthew's eyes were full of sadness again. Although it was cruel, Matthew really couldn't refute it. Was this the so-called necessary sacrifice? Humans couldn't deal with demonic beast commanders. Only servants could, and combined with the situation at that time, they could only send servants to the depths of the demonic beast to carry out the decapitation operation. However, even so, in the face of another sacrifice, Matthew still couldn't look at this problem calmly. Matthew, in a war, anyone's sacrifice is just a number. This is the essence of war. In the past, he, Artoria, and many knights of the Round Table led countless knights to fight in the north and south, and it could be said that he had already seen through the essence of war. But in this war between the demonic beasts and the humans, even if the servants sacrificed themselves, as long as their sacrifice created the conditions for the humans to win in the future, then their sacrifice was not in vain. Just like the servants who sacrificed themselves for you in the previous 6 singularities, we should remember them and work harder for the next operation. We can't let their sacrifice go to waste. Merlin is right. The original 11 demonic beast commanders have now been reduced to 6, but there are still 10 servants on the human side. The scale of victory is gradually tilting to our side. At this time, we should work harder. How can we be depressed because of the servant's sacrifice? Yes, Villo-senpai, I'm still recovering, sorry. Matthew patted his cheek and recovered again. Because of his incomparable emotional state, Matthew's mood recovered quickly after the training of 6 singularities. However, at this time, Gadotsi noticed some problems. Wait a minute, why are there still 6 demonic beast commanders left? Didn't we defeat 4 in total? It stands to reason that there should be 7 demonic beast commanders left, right? This was something that Matthew didn't notice. Gadotsi counted his fingers and thought to himself, could it be that he had miscalculated? This is my negligence. When I came here before, I encountered a demonic beast commander and killed it, so there are 6 demonic beast commanders left. Indeed, only Wuming and Merlin knew about the death of the prototype Yulidum. After that, the 2 of them didn't talk about it, so it was normal that Gadotsi didn't know about it. Wait a minute, was the previous light beam caused by Villo? Roman's incomparably shocked voice came from Gadotsi's bracelet, and Wuming could imagine Roman's expression at the moment. That guy was different from the other demonic beasts, so I paid a little attention to it, but I overdid it. Wuming smiled a little embarrassedly. Gadotsi, Matthew, Roman, and Leonardo da Vinci fell into a state of shock. Lord Hyunryong overdid it a little, but it's very scary. Only Merlin smiled at the side. Forget it. The Knights of the Round Table can be Uruk Hyunryong, so it's not surprising that you can kill a demonic beast commander alone. It's not alone. That Yulidum has quite a few mass-produced Yulidum by its side. Although Wuming really didn't care about them, they were indeed destroyed by the aftermath of Wuming's attack. Sure enough, Senior Villo is really strong. I think so too, Matthew. The conversation between the two had other meanings, and Wuming was still a little unaware. Chapter 908. Gadotsi and Matthew whispered to each other about Wuming's unconsciousness. Regarding the Uruk Hyunryong's lack of awareness of his own power, I've recorded this as well as the previous incident where his servant was killed by his own skill. Although Roman was stunned when they were talking about Okita Soki, he still recorded everything that should be recorded. Not to mention that this news was a miracle to the magic world. All the actions in the singularity had to be recorded in the database. I'm just telling the truth. However, the fact that I was able to eliminate a major monster commander so easily is probably because the other party underestimated me. Being able to withstand Wuming's multiple spells was indeed a testament to the strength of the major monster commander. Although Yulidum was dying after receiving Wuming's attack, it was not to be assumed that the major monster commander was not as powerful as imagined. First of all, Yulidum was tricked by Wuming. He did not even know that Wuming had activated his multiple spells. If Yulidum had been prepared, the outcome would have been uncertain. Second, the multiple spells that Wuming used on Yulidum could only be used in the wilderness. If it were in a city or a place with a lot of people, Wuming would definitely not dare to use this trick. Although the impact of multiple spells was not as great as the nuclear bombs in human society in the later period, it could still cause a certain amount of damage. The originally peaceful plateau had now been turned into a plateau basin by Wuming's attack. The range of this spell was too large. Not to mention the impact of earthquakes. If it was released in a city, it would be almost impossible for any human to survive. In short, this trick could not be used so easily in the future. Even if it did not affect humans, if there were earthquakes or something like that every day, humans would be scared half to death. How would they be able to fight major monsters then? For war, individual bravery was not the key. The easiest way was to rely on the soldiers at the bottom. Only when they had enough momentum and vigor could they fight a tough battle. However, once Wu Ming had too many concerns, the difficulty of dealing with major monster commanders would definitely increase. Especially after listening to some of the details of the major monster commanders provided by Merlin, Wu Ming had a deeper understanding of them. If it was a one-on-one battle, Wu Ming would not be afraid of any of the major monster commanders at the moment. However, if it was Wu Ming alone, it would be a little difficult for him to fight all the major monster commanders. Besides, he did not know the specific situation of Gorgon, who had been staying in the house all this time. Wu Ming's plan might fail. However, he couldn't put too much pressure on the magical beast. He had to learn to grasp the principle that going too far was as bad as falling short. Is it possible that the divinity is not strong enough, so it can't be detected? Matthew asked. The leopard man they encountered before was also a god, but if they didn't encounter him, Chaldea's instruments couldn't detect his existence at all. Only gods with strong divinity, like the goddess of warcraft and the Quetzalcoatl, could be detected by Chaldea's instruments without contact. That's impossible. Ishtar is the mistress of the sky. Even if she is a pseudo-servant at the moment, her divinity can't be that weak. Wu Ming saw Ishtar the last time he came here. Although she came as a pseudo-servant in the form of a girl, her divinity didn't decrease much. She was still a very powerful divine servant. Oh, another pseudo-servant. Gadotsi nodded. She always felt that she always encountered pseudo-servants. Although Ishtar is a pseudo-servant, she is much more powerful than the leopard man, Wu Ming added. At that moment, the almighty Leonardo da Vinci spoke. Is it related to the goddess of the underworld? Chapter 909. What does this have to do with the goddess of the underworld? Gadotsi expressed that she really didn't know anything about the myths of the Mesopotamia region. The goddess of the underworld that Leonardo da Vinci refers to is an existence named Ereshkigal. She is known as the mistress of the underworld. In a sense, she is the half-body of the mistress of the heavens, Ishtar. Wu Ming explained to Gadotsi. He was also a Yura Hyunryong. As a local, at least he knew more than Roman and the others. Since there's a legend of half-body, it naturally means that the two are different sides of the same pillar god. In this case, the goddess of the underworld and the loser goddess on this mountain should be considered the same pillar god. If they share the same divinity, it's normal that they can't be detected. If the goddess of the underworld is Ereshkigal, then this situation is true. Roman, who was sitting in Chaldea's seat, was constantly tapping on the keyboard, modifying the data of the singularity of Mesopotamia registered in Chaldea's database. It's very likely that, as Hyunryong said, Chaldea only detected the existence of 4 gods. Roman made the final confirmation. Although I don't have a good impression of that girl. Even if she is a loser, she is still a goddess. If she joins us and signs a temporary contract with Tachika, it will be a big boost to our combat power. Wu Ming had this idea, which was why he dragged Gadotsi and Matthew to Mount Abiff. And in this way, even Gil won't say anything about you leaving the southern jungle without permission. After all, compared to getting the loser goddess to join us, it's unwise to let the loser goddess be a lone follower. After all, it was more reassuring to have an unstable element in one's hands than to let it go. How dare you say that? You bastard. The voice of a young girl, filled with resentment, entered the ears of everyone who had climbed halfway up the mountain. Master, it's a servant's reaction. Please stand behind me. Matthew instantly opened his hand and conjured shield. He stood in front of Gadotsi, protecting her behind him. In the face of unknown servants, the first thing to do was to protect their master. What's this reaction? Is it a god? Roman, who was in Chaldea, was shocked when he saw the results of the instrument. Ishtar, he said. Wuming looked up at the charming person sitting on the bow like heavenly ship Anna in the sky. I didn't expect you to have the guts to look for me here, Hyunryong. Ishtar's resentment towards Wuming seemed to be particularly big, and Ishtar didn't seem to pay attention to anyone else. She only paid attention to Wuming. Vilo-senpai, what's going on? Matthew couldn't help but ask. From Ishtar's reaction, it was obvious that Wuming had provoked him, and it was not a light one. Don't ask me. Even if you ask me, I don't have the impression of provoking this troublesome guy. Hey! Don't ignore me whispering there. Along with Ishtar's furious voice, a piercing sound came into everyone's ears. Whoosh! A golden flash of light shot straight towards Wu Ming. Vilo-senpai, assassin, Matthew and Gadatsi couldn't help but shout. Clank! Anzurgen's staff appeared from the side, and Wu Ming held it directly in his hand, and the golden flash hit it directly. This is... The twisted golden staff attracted everyone's attention, and the 7 snake heads inlaid with different colored gems were full of noble and strange colors. Even Ishtar froze in midair with her hands in a shooting position. I know. Roman, who thought he had completely figured it out, was the first to speak and break the silence. As we all know, the fight for power is extremely common in myths. Even the virtuous Uruk Hyunryong also has a desire for power. According to the Gilgamesh epic records, the Uruk Hyunryong once seized Ishtar's position as the Uruk city god and drove Ishtar out of the Uruk. There are also many small stories that have been investigated by many scholars and experts. Although various experts and professors have different opinions, there are many parts that are worth referencing. For example, Uruk Hyunryong seized other things from Ishtar. When Roman said this, Wuming more or less understood what he was trying to say. The staff in Hyunryong's hand is obviously consistent with the 7-headed warhammer staff that belonged to Ishtar in the myths. So, it's probably because the Uruk Hyunryong seized a lot of things from Ishtar that caused Ishtar to hate the Uruk Hyunryong. Roman explained with confidence. Gadatsi and Matthew nodded as if they had suddenly seen the light. Only Merlin watched the scene unfold with a smile and did not say anything. If Wuming didn't know whether he had done it or not, he might have believed it too. When he thought about it carefully, Roman's analysis was indeed quite reasonable. In this way, it was understandable that Ishtar was full of resentment and anger towards Wuming. What the hell is this? Wuming sighed helplessly. Reasonable, reasonable, reasonable. Facts were facts. This was something that couldn't be said carelessly. Wuming didn't steal anything from Ishtar at all. Well, the idea of stealing the Uruk city guardian was also nonsense. However, Wuming could more or less understand why all of this turned out like this. Wuming, who didn't like Ishtar, did drive Ishtar away in the past, but that was only because Ishtar had done something that he couldn't do, so Wuming did that. And Ishtar would come back soon because she couldn't do without the tributes from the citizens, such as gems, 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 and so on. Perhaps it was because he had driven her away too many times. Coupled with the fact that the records of later generations weren't perfect, the story was gradually changed into that Uruk Hyunryong stole the position of a Uruk city guardian from Ishtar. Wuming also understood. After all, the various myths in modern times were the result of people's exaggerations in history. As for the so-called 7-headed warhammer staff, it was purely because it was similar. It wasn't Ishtar's staff at all. But did Ishtar really think so? Yes, that's right. I'm talking to you, Hyunryong. Give me back my 7-headed warhammer staff. At this moment, Ishtar didn't care whether what Roman said was true or not. She was going to make the best of it. She had her eyes on the gorgeous staff. Chapter 9-10. At that moment, Gadatsi and Matthew didn't know what to say. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci, who were in the Chaldea control room, naturally didn't speak again. It was obvious that the matter was both complicated and simple. But all in all, Wuming seemed to be in the right. Even Gadotsi and Matthew could see that Ishtar was obviously panicking. Ishtar was obviously the kind of person who couldn't refute after her lie was exposed in front of her elders. Only Merlin, who knew what was going on, half squatted on the ground with his back facing everyone. He seemed to be laughing so hard that he was twitching. "You stupid goddess, are you blinded by money? You don't even know how to lie." Ishtar was even more embarrassed by Wu Ming's words. After all, this was indeed the truth. Ishtar could speak casually in front of others, but in front of Wu Ming, it was a little difficult. Although I also know that you want to take advantage of Roman's words and take my Ains Uar gong staff for yourself, I still have to say that your IQ matches the number of gems you have. Finally, Wu Ming shouted a sentence. "You shameless loser and stupid goddess. Reflect on yourself." The roar like a dragon resounded through the sky, and Gadotsi and Matthew couldn't help but cover their ears. The magic contained in Wu Ming's voice even interfered with the communication between Chaldea and Gadotsi. In short, although Wu Ming's voice couldn't spread to the Uruk, it was not a problem for it to spread to the entire Abyss Mountain. However, no matter who was right or wrong in this matter, Wu Ming's voice was a disaster not much worse than social death for Ishtar. "Damn Hyunryong." As if she had lost her mind, Ishtar hugged her head with both hands, and her eyes lost their focus. She sat on horse Anna and swayed as if she was about to fall off. Seeing this scene, the innocent little angel Mashu quickly reminded Ishtar. After all, Ishtar really looked like a daughter who couldn't do anything if no one took care of her. "Miss Ishtar, please be careful. It's dangerous." Matthew's words made Ishtar stunned, but then she also recovered from the torture given by Wu Ming. "Don't worry, I won't fall off horse Anna." Ishtar flipped her hair as she spoke. Her whole person was full of charm, which was very much in line with her image as the mistress of the heavens, if the terrible scene from before was ignored. Speaking of which, were we just now? With one hand on her chin, Ishtar was quite distressed as she recalled the conversation between her and Wu Ming. This made Wu Ming blush with shame. He always felt that this goddess who descended by relying on the body of a human girl had become quite unreliable. "Don't even think about my staff of Anzavolgan, loser goddess. Also, quickly go back to Uruk and be a city god. The demonic beasts have caused serious damage to this land, and the Uruk needs your strength." 3 times, Ishtar's face darkened. "You actually called me loser goddess 3 times. You're dead." Ishtar roared and aimed the simulated scope in Wu Ming's direction. Horse Anna began to gather magic. "Master, be careful." Matthew approached Gadotsi and raised his shield again. "Senior Villo, please be careful." However, Wu Ming did not pay attention to Matthew's words. His attention was on something else. Wu Ming had said loser goddess more than 3 times, but Ishtar had only heard it 3 times. In other words, Ishtar had just arrived. So it was at that time, Wu Ming whispered to himself, "I heard it all before. You completely disliked my wanton behavior and wanted to detain me. I won't listen to you and sign a temporary contract with the human master over there." Wu Ming's heart sank. Sure enough, Ishtar had heard what he said at that time. "Can you be considered the mistress of the heavens like this? Ishtar, when your father and the others disappeared, you only know how to run away. I prefer the stubborn and mischievous goddess of the past who can be straightforward and stupid, and not the current loser goddess. You're a disgrace to the title of mistress of the heavens. I think you might as well stay in the border area of the Mesopotamia until we save this world." Loser goddess. Gadotsi and Matthew both looked at Wu Ming in shock. They were shocked that Wu Ming could say such harsh and mocking words. Even Merlin, who had been released from his stomach ache from laughing state, became slightly more serious. At the same time, the atmosphere at the scene became very oppressive. It was like a precursor to a volcanic eruption. However, since it was called a precursor, it meant that there was no danger at the moment. Tianzhou Horse Anna's magic cannon muzzle also stopped condensing magic. "What did you say?" Ishtar was provoked by Wu Ming's words. At this moment, her face was even gloomier than before. The magic emitted from her body made Gadotsi and Matthew tremble. Senior Villo, why don't you stop talking for now? Matthew and Gadotsi try to persuade Wuming. After all, it was not a wise thing to unilaterally anger the other party, was it not? However, this was the effect Wuming wanted. As the mistress of the heavens, Ishtar also had a very strong self-esteem, except when it came to gems. Through this aspect, he could well control the angry Ishtar. Of course, there was also a chance that it would make the other party even more furious. Next, it was time to see how Wuming would turn the situation around. I'm telling the truth. If you were Father God and the others, you would definitely take the initiative to clean up the magic beasts raging on the earth and protect the humans who believe in the gods. And you, if I'm not wrong, in addition to driving Tianzhou Horse Anna around, you would definitely only go to a sparsely populated place like the ranch to kill a few magic beasts and then sweep away the ranch owner's money. Ishtar. Wuming's words made Ishtar's face turn red instead of exploding. The magic stagnant at Ma Anna's muzzle also dissipated. What are you talking about? How could I do that? I'm just taking the offerings from the ranch owner. In other words, you did do that. This time, it was Wuming's turn to be gloomy. How thick-skinned must she be to do such a thing? Squeak. Seeing Wuming like this, Ishtar seemed to be frightened and let out a strange cry. Gadotsi, Matthew, and Roman and Leonardo da Vinci, who were in Chaldea's control room, looked like they had seen a ghost. At this moment, they felt like Wuming was the perfect counter to Ishtar. You just wait. I'm not done with you, Ishtar said fiercely as she rode Tianzhou Horse Anna to the top of the mountain. However, not knowing if it was an illusion, Gadotsi and the others felt that Ishtar was crying when she said this. Was the mistress of the heavens being bullied by the Uruk Hyunryong and crying? That's impossible, probably. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.